Welcome to a new guide on this channel, and on this occasion is WaveState from KORG. This is not a review, it's a complete deep dive guide about this synth. Now, I usually upload one guide on a single video to cover pretty much all the synthesizer. Now, in the case of WaveState, this is just an impossible task. This synth, it's super massive. So I will divide the guide on 3 different parts, and the goal is to get to wave sequencing. And to do that, to get to wave sequencing, you need to learn all the other controls first. So on this one, we will do that. We'll talk pretty much about everything else, and then when we are done on the next video, in the next volume, let's say, we will just cover and work with wave sequencing. Now, everything on this guide is in chapters, so if you look at the description or the timeline, you can jump to a section or skip the ones you don't want. So if you like these guides, please like and subscribe, and if you have the money, you can buy me a coffee. Yeah, everything is on the description. Okay, so let's just begin. Okay, so what is it? Now, a lot of people, if you go to the web, a lot of people are just confused in what this is or what it can do. And if you go to forums, there, you can find a lot of questions, and there's a lot of confusion. And first, I'm gonna kind of break it down in what this is. So this synth is essentially a sampler in essence. But it goes a lot deeper than that. So this has no oscillators. It uses samples that you can play as a synthesizer or to create a sequence of sounds. You have kind of 2 ways of using this. So within the same synth, you have your main performance. That's how it works. And if you go all the way up like that, notice that it says init performance. So this is like your default patch or your patch for this synthesizer. Everything works on a performance. So you don't have a patch, you have a performance. So a performance can contain 4 layers of different sounds. So it's like having 4 different synthesizers that can run in parallel. And you have them right here. You have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So each layer, the A, the B, the C, and the D, has its own filter, its own envelope, voices, LFOs, and effects. So you can use this synth as 4 instruments, maybe like 4 different samplers combined on one single unit. But there's a twist. Each layer is capable of having a wave sequence. Now, which is a sequence of different instructions we can use, like, for example, changing the sample. We can use different samples on each different step on the same wave sequence, or maybe we can change the time or change the pitch or change, all the different lanes or layers that you have right here. So you could have a layer A it's playing a bass, maybe on the first sample, and then when it goes to the second step, it will have a different sample, and maybe on the third one, it will have a different sample. So for each step, when you create a wave sequence, you have like a collection of different samples, and you are going to be kind of modulating or changing the different properties within this. And maybe on the layer B, you might have one single multi-sample like a keys with your own filter and LFOs and everything else, but it's just going to be one multi-sample. So then maybe the layer C has some strings, and the layer D maybe has a percussive element, and some drums, and you can create a sequence for these drums. Maybe the first one will have a kick, and then when it goes to the next one, it will have a snare, and so on and so on and so on. So for example, if I go right here and we turn this encoder, we can, scroll through all the different presets that you have available. Maybe I'm going to go to this one, and you all have this preset. It's from factory. And if I enter to that one, we are going to be loading this performance, this patch. And this patch has 3 different layers enabled. Now, by just tapping to the layers, you will see what this is doing. So the sequence A has a wave sequence because we can see this screen. And if we go to the B has a wave sequence, is a completely different wave sequence with a different, thing. But if we go to the C, it's just using a multi-sample. And what you can do, you can, of course, solo the different layers so you can hear what's going on. If I press the keys right here at the top, there's nothing going on. So this is programmed so we can play a lower key, and we get kind of you get that. So if I go to this one and enable, on this one, we will have a different sound. And if I play here, we have that. And if I go to the third one, enter and see, we are going to be getting a single multi-sample, which is just the bass. So when you enable all the 3 layers, you have a combination of 3 different things running in parallel, whether it's a wave sequence or a multi-sample. So if I play a key, that one is going to be mainly playing the layer A and the bass, which is the layer C. But if I go right here at the top, we are doing the layer A. So that's the way it works. Now, of course, you need to learn all the different controls and all the options that you have available in order to create something like this. So again, this is not a review, it's a guide, it's like a course. It's going to be long, so be patient. Now, these videos are not going anywhere. Everything is time coded. If you look at the description or the timeline, everything is in sections. So I plan all of this like if it was a course. So to get to wave sequences, which is a little bit, more kind of I want to say complicated, but we need to understand how the synth works on a much global way. We need to dominate the layers. You need to fully understand how the layers work. And we need to understand all the different knobs and controls and all the different pages and options we have right here. Now, if I start this kind of a course, let's just call it a course because that's what it is. And if I start right here on the wave sequence, I will be jumping to different sections that we never discussed. So it just makes no sense for me to start on a wave sequence. And it will be, very confusing for you. So like I said before, we are going to break it down in parts. First, we need to dominate the layers. And then all of this section. And once we know how to operate the synth as a sampler with 4 different layers, then we will go to creating wave sequences. Okay, so enough intro. So let's start breaking it down. So perform this button, it's like your home button. Every time you have a performance selected, when you go there, you're going to be kind of going to home. And if you have a layer selected right there, it will give you information about the performance that you're loading. And the performance is the combination of the 4 layers, whether it's a wave sequence or a multisample. It doesn't matter, it's like your main patch. But then if you read just below that, it will tell you information about the layer. In this case, it says layer A, something and something. And if I change it, it will give you below information about which layer you're currently working with. In this case, if we change the layers, we can see information about that. Now, if I go right here and you want to start from the scratch with an init patch, you need to scroll all the way up until you find the init performance. And then you press enter and you are on an initial patch. Now, the initial patch already has a wave sequence. It's a very simple kind of a wave sequence. And it's just, you only have the layer A enabled. If you go to the other ones, you just have pretty much nothing. When you have a layer selected, you can inspect with the select what you have available. And this will take you to a new screen. And it says wave sequence, but notice that it says A. So everything is about the A, the B, the C, or the D in this case. Now you have a mode and you have a preset, and then you have more options that we will discuss later. But right now, it's just telling me this is a wave sequence. That's the mode. And then you have a preset. You can load different wave sequences from the memory of the synthesizer. So right now we care about the mode. Later we will talk about how to, store presets and use them. In this case, we need to talk about the mode. So you can have mainly 2 different modes. Wave sequence, or we can just change it to a single multi-sample. And depends on what you're selecting, depends on what you can do. Now, we're going to work mostly with single multi-samples, and when we are ready, we will talk about the wave sequence. So, of course, when you go to a single multi-sample, it's going to allow you to just play some keys because it's just a single multi-sample. And you can, get some piano, some basses, whatever it is that you want to do. Now, later, then it says MS. So this is multi-sample. So right here, you have something, and you can, of course, do enter. And when you go there, it's going to give you different options, and you can scroll through all the different sounds and things that you can select as a multi-sample. And I mean, you have a million. And this is, of course, part of the problem. Since you have a lot of multi-samples, how do you do to kind of find something very specific? Maybe you want a bass. So if you do shift and you do hold it and you do like this, the page plus or the arrow, it will take you to the sort, kind of a filter and sort. And you can search by category or collection. So if you go to category right now, it's all. So we are kind of toggling through all the different patches that live on this, all the different sounds or samples that live on the synthesizer, which is, maybe not that good. So if you go there, it will just ask you, what category you want. Is it bass? Is it lead? And so on and so on and so on. So maybe if I select the bass, it will just go and tell you you are in the bass category. So everything that you select or you toggle is going to be about basses. So doing the shift and the page plus, sometimes it's just not that fun because you need to kind of do a lot of steps. Now on the new version of the the firmware, they kind of updated. So now when you are, let me go just right here. And let me go to first all. I'm going to maybe go enter and go to all. So what we want to do, we want to scroll through all the categories, right? So whenever you're there, right here, the sequences, they will be toggling through the different categories. So 1 is going to be all, then 2 is going to be basses, leads, pads, synths, and so on, and so on, and so on. So it's just a bit easier just to toggle the different categories you have available. So if I go back to perform and I just try to toggle, maybe different patches that we have available, this is just the same thing. You have a million patches, but right here at the bottom, you can maybe toggle through different categories. And now we are toggling performances, which are again combinations of layers and wave sequences and single multi-samples, or just the presets of your synthesizer. Now this option that you have right here of kind of a speed dial of different categories works pretty much for every single thing that you are looking for right here. So in this case, we only use it for performances and to select maybe a sound, but you can use it for other things that we will talk later. Now notice that maybe if I go back right here and I go all the way back home, and maybe if I kind of let's say I make a change, right? I'm gonna just double tap this and just disable, so nothing is being played. Once you do this, let's say that you want to keep this performance because you liked it, and maybe you scroll and do something like this, you're going to be losing whatever you did. So this has no kind of a memory in terms of that. We will not kind of remember your patch. So maybe you can do undo and go back to what you had before on the temporal memory. It doesn't have that. So whenever you do something, make sure you save it. Okay, so let's go right here. I'm going to start on an init performance, and we know how this works. This one is going to be a wave sequence. So we want to change that. We need to be right there on the A. And remember, you can just tap and toggle through the 4 layers. And then when you're ready to decide if this is a wave sequence or a multi-sample, you go there and you just, in this case, change it to a multi-sample. You go to the sound and you need to maybe find a sound. Okay, so I'm going to be selecting this one, analog strings, which is, something easy to hear. And I'm going to do enter, and there we go. We have something loaded on the layer A. Now to go to layer B, again, we just need to tap it, and we are going to be going to the B, and this one has a wave sequence by default. So again, we want to do the same thing. I'm going to select a single multi-sample, go do enter right here, and I want to select maybe a different thing. I'm going to be selecting this one, the bell tree multi. I'm going to do enter. And now if I play it, notice that we have the strings. Now, the fact that you tap the layers, it doesn't mean that you are enabling the layer. So we have a few tricks right here. Just double tapping the layer, just like that. Let me just move it right there. Double tapping it, it will just enable the layer. And if you double tap it, it will just turn it off. Now, also you can do shift and the layer just to enable, or just toggle on, or shift and then layer and turn it off. In this case, I'm just going to enable both. So if I play something, we have the strings, and we have both layers playing at the same time. But what happens if I want to audition maybe just that one? What do I need to double tap this in order to turn it off and just leave this one on? Well, yeah, you can do that. You can do double tap, and now the layer B is the only one playing, or maybe double tap this one and double tap the A and play that one. But there's a better way. If you have all enable, or maybe just, 2, and you want to audition or solo just this layer, you can go right here and do enter, press and hold, and just tap the layer, and it will just toggle off any other layer and just, enable that one. Okay, so if I go back to home, notice that if we select the layer B, it's going to give us this information. We have no wave sequence because, it's a single multi-sample. And if I go to the A, we have the same thing. Now, again, at the top, it shows the name of the patch, which is the performance. And if you go down, it will give you information about the layer you're selecting. We are not now on the A, and it says layer A, and then it says init program. So you have a lot of different categories on the synthesizer. You have the performances, we already know that one, and then we have the layers, and then we have programs. So each layer, A, B, C, and D, might be loading some kind of a program, and a program is going to be a wave sequence, or something that holds a wave sequence, or multi-sample, or whatever is that you have stored on the memory of the synthesizer. And each different program has settings and options and a lot of things that we might shift or just change. Now, if I go right here and notice it says again init performance and it says init program. If I go to the arrows, we are going to be scrolling down to the program so we can maybe just change the program. So if I go there, it will take you to the list of programs, just like we go to the list of samples and the list of wave sequences. Now later, when you create something right here, maybe on the layer A, you can save it as a program so you can reuse that later, maybe on a different patch. Now, let me go back home. I want to keep what I have on the layer A, on the layer B, you know, the sounds we selected. So I just want to solo the layer C, and we have the default init performance. Now, what I want to do, I want to, again, not go to the performance, go to the layer C and the init program, and I want to select a program. And then again, this one works just like the samples and the performances. So you can select maybe something related to bass, leads, synths, and so on and so on and so on. I'm going to be selecting a sequence, and I'm going to be selecting the first one. So once I do that, that program is going to be loaded on the C layer. So if I play something, we are just going to be getting, in this case, a wave sequence, because that's what that program has in memory. So just by doing this, you can maybe go to different layers and load different programs and just, create, a combination of different sounds that you have on your synthesizer. Now, I know this is a little bit kind of a weird because we usually work with synthesizers and we have patches and that's it. In this case, you have performances, which is like the whole thing. And inside you have layers, which might have wave sequences or samples. And inside of each layer, you might be loading a program, which is something that we can store and load on different presets or maybe different layers that it contains a wave sequence or maybe, a multi-sample. But remember that you have all of these names and you need to remember what they are and the differences, between performances, programs, wave sequence, and in this case, samples. It's what we know right now. We have more, but it's what we know. So yeah, if you want to write it down, you need to remember that you have the performances, programs, wave sequences, and samples, and you have more, but you're not there yet. And you can reuse them and save them and maybe reuse them on a clean patch. We start a new patch and we select different parts of whatever we have, in memory of the synthesizer and create kind of a big sound by reusing the parts we already did or what we have from factory. That's kind of the whole point, and that's why you have a lot of different kind of categories and names. So each program has different options. So we need to talk about all the options we have for each program. So when you go right here, of course, to home, it will tell you the name. And then if you go right there, it will tell you the name of the program, which is the default one. Right now, we have just pretty much nothing. Now, if you do shift and page, it's going to take you to the options, the settings of the whole program. So at the top, it will give you first a lot of options. Notice that you have 8 different pages. Now, all the 8 different pages are not about that program or that layer. It's just a combination of a lot of things. So the first one, after, the first one is going to be this one, and the second page is going to be this. So the layer programs means that you can have the inspect the A, B, C, and D, and you can, of course, change the volume, maybe just for that one, for that layer, for that program, or you can lower the volume for that program. Pretty simple. Now, then, of course, you can select the name. Let me just go back to 0. So then you can go right here and maybe select a different program. Now, if you go and do enter, it will take you again to the page where you can select the program. And once you select it, it's going to load it right there. So always remember, if you change the program and you never saved it, it's going to dispose it. So you get at the bottom this performance halt. So this, of course, when I play a key, it's going to be playing every time I play a key. Now, if I turn it on, it's going to be holding it for me. Now, of course, you need to be careful because this has a lot of voices. If I play many different keys, you can have more keys. And again, I'm not holding this. So if we turn it off, of course, you're going to need to play them. Now, you have a kind of a speed dial for this. You can do shift and you can do right here, the latch. And once you go there, it's just going to turn it on and off. And notice that it's blinking. So you can navigate the different pages that you have available by doing holding shift, and then going to the next page, or you can move backwards to that one. So the next one is going to be the velocity zones, and the next one is going to be about the keyboard zones. So this is something super useful and necessary that you need to learn, but right now it's just super specific. We are going to be talking about this later. Now then the next option, it's going to be talking about the program setup. And now notice that we are entering in the program and then the A. So now, of course, we are going to be working with the settings of each program on the layer. So, of course, you can, manage the volume. And this is not going to go up in volume. It's just going to be kind of a trim the volume. It's just going to go down in volume. Then, of course, you can go right here and just transpose it by semitones. Pretty self-explanatory. Now then you have your trigger on. So this means that when you play something, it's just going to play whatever sample, whatever multi-sample. Now if I just turn it off, it means that now it's going to be playing not when I press the key, but when I release it. Notice that it's just playing the note when I just release the keys. So then you have your random pitch range. Now of course, this is just works with samples. It's not an analog synthesizer. So what this can do, since you, of course, can use a lot of voices and play chords and so on, is going to kind of detune by sense the pitch a little bit so you can get this analog kind of a vibe. And of course, I'm going to need to just turn this on. Now, it's not super noticeable until you go really up. Notice that if I play a key, it's going to sound like that. Sounds very detuned. And if I go back, it sounds more, tuned. So yeah, it's just a nice feature so you can get this analog kind of a vibe. And then you have the hold. This is the same hold, but this one is going to be for this layer, not for the whole thing. So if I play a key, it's just going to hold whatever I do. But again, remember, it's just for this layer and program. So again, you have more pages. If I go to the next one, now it's going to be talking about the voice assign. So the voice assign is going to be about voices. Now this thing has a lot of voices. So you can do poly, and this is what we are doing now by default. If I make a chord, we just get a chord. But you can go and just change it to mono. And of course, the options will change depending on what you have. So mono, of course, means that you can play one key at a time, right? So I'm going to be going back to poly, and if I go right there to single trigger, this means that the nodes will not overlap or will overlap. And it's something a little bit hard to hear. So right here you have the amp section. I'm going to go there, and we are going to be talking about this later, but for now I'm just going to add release. Now, of course, if I play a key, it's going to take a long time to die. And I'm going to go back to that, option that we have right there. I'm going to go back to the perform. So now that we have a lot of release, when I play a note and let me just do it right here, and I release it, of course the note is going to take a long time to kind of die. So with off, it means that the notes will overlap. If I play a key and then I release it and play it again, the notes are just overlapping. Now, if we turn it to on, and even though the release is long, when I press it play again, the notes will not overlap. It's just kind of a... And notice that there's a difference. Yeah, that's the difference. So then you have the max number of notes, and by default it's dynamic, which means that you can play as many keys as you want, and this has 64 voices. Now this synth, of course, has a processor. It's digital. So if you start using more resources, the processor will suffer just a little bit more. So right here in this option, instead of leave it to dynamic, which is you can play as many as you want, you can just limit the amount of notes or keys you can play. Now remember again, as you use more resources, it's going to suffer a little bit more. This is not a magical device yet. So dynamic, it means, of course, as many as you want. And if you go up, you're going to be kind of deciding how many keys or how many keys you can play at the same time on poly, of course. For now, I'm going to leave it to dynamic. And then what you have is the unison. So if I play one key, we are playing one single voice, right? So we are playing one single voice. Now you can use unison. And let me just go down on the release because it's just way too much. I'm going to go back. So right now we are using one voice per key, but you can do unison voices. If I go up on the voices, it's just going to stack 5 different voices on top of each other. This is how unison works. And notice that there's kind of a phasey sound. And it's because all voices are just stacked on top of each other. The trick comes when you start to detune the voices and you get this, unison kind of a sound. Now, then you have this options, thickness and stereo. Now, thickness, it means that it will detune the voices evenly. If you're doing 22 cents and you're using 5, they're all going to be kind of evenly detuned. But as you go up, the voices are not going to be evenly detuned. They're going to be a little bit different. So this is just going to be, again, just adding a little bit more kind of a thickness. Let me go up a little bit in volume. Right, so that's what it means. And right here, everything is gonna start shining a little bit more when you add stereo. Of course, now we can really hear maybe the thickness. That is the thickness, just a little bit different. We get more out of the unison. So yeah. Now then, of course, when you go to mono, you have the legato and you have your priority. This is something, very common with any kind of a synth. Now, your priority is by default last. So if you are, in mono, it means that you can play one key at a time. And notice that you still have, the option to, of course, do many voices and do unison voices. And now, if I play one single key, I'm just playing one single key, all right? So the priority is last. So it doesn't matter if I play a key that goes, a higher key or a lower key. You're just going to go and play it. You can change your priority to high, which means that you can only play higher keys when you're holding and not lower keys. And then, of course, you have the other one, which is going to be low. If I press something, I play something on the higher keys, nothing is going to happen. If I play the lowers, that's just going to work. Now, by default, the last is, what you get. And then, of course, you have your legato on and off. Maybe we're going to talk about that one later when we reach different sections because we are going to use them. But for now, I'm going to move on to the next category, which is going to be the layer setup. And notice how everything changes. It starts with the layer programs, then it goes to the velocity zones, then it goes to the program setup, then it goes to the voices, and then it goes to the layer. But now we are talking about the A and not about the whole, the whole thing. And the next one is going to be the layer setup. And this, again, it's just a little bit, just easy. The layer setup, it's not the program. Remember that we have a layer, and within the layer, we have a program. Now, in this case, you can go up in volume, or you can go down in volume. This is going to be the volume of the layer, not the program. And you can, of course, change by octave. Very simple to understand. And you can, of course, do it in cents. Tiny little adjustments. Now then it says, of course, use global MIDI channel on. Right now it's like using one single channel, like the global MIDI channel on this layer. But what you can do, you can just turn it off and you can select the MIDI channel where this layer is going to be going out. The last page is about the performance setup, and we kind of go through all the different stages, the layers, the program, the voices, the velocity zones, and then the last one is going to be about the performance, which is kind of the whole, the whole patch with all the layers and the programs inside. And again, you can go up in volume, octaves, and so on and so on. But then you have some other options, and this is something I'm going to be covering on the different video because it's just way too specific. So I want to kind of keep things simple until, we learn more, and then we're going to be adding more stuff. So yeah, it's something I'm going to be covering on a different video because it's just way too specific. And right now we are just starting and adding very specific stuff, or just trying to kind of show you or teach you very specific settings or things we can do. It's just going to be a little bit confusing. I much prefer to, go the easy way, the easy road, and then later we just add more stuff to it. All right, so we know how to start a performance, how to select a performance, how to use the layers, how to work with programs, and how to change the settings of our program. So now we need to talk about saving because, of course, if you do something, you might want to save it, and this saving is a little bit confusing. So before we can continue, we need to kind of save our work. So we need to talk about saving. So I'm going to be kind of saving this, that's fine. So what you need to do, you need to go to write. And right here, you will have a lot of options. Right now we have the type and the name. Now, so within, of course, the type, you can save many, many things. So you have the performance, and the performance is everything that you do with the layers, with the programs, everything that we have on this patch. So when you save a performance, you're kind of saving them all, but you're not saving the tiny parts as well. You're just saving it all as a whole. Kind of make a rhyme there. So when you save the performance, you're gonna need to change or to select or leave it on performance. Now notice that it says protected, cannot overwrite, and it's because we are using the init performance. That is write protected, so we cannot use that name. So what we need to do, we just need to do enter. And right here, you will kind of need to select a name. And by doing shift, you just can change the characters that you want to use. And with the arrows, you're going to be going up or down. That's, common sense. And if I maybe go right here, I'm just going to be using, maybe going to go right there. Let me go to the first one. And I'm going to be selecting right here, just an icon so we can identify that this is our patch. I'm going to do equal. Why not? Or maybe something you can see on the screen. I'm going to use the ampersand. So I'm going to do that one. And when I go to the next one, I'm going to do something simple. So I'm going to be doing that. I'm going to be ant0. And that's going to be the name, just not to expend a lot of time. What happens if you want to delete the characters? You can do shift and page minus, and it's going to be deleting the characters that you have at the back. So I'm going to use ant0. This is going to be the name of my performance. I know it sucks, but we are saving time, and this is just a very long kind of a guide. So once I do enter, this is going to be saving my whole performance under the ampersand and then 0. Now, if you do enter, again, you can change the name. That's fine. So that's it. What you want to do shift and right to save a new, because this one, the ampersand and 0, doesn't exist on the memory. So what we do is shift and we do a right, and it's going to save it as a new performance. You need to confirm with enter. And once it's done, notice that we have our name, our performance name. Now, if you go right there and you change it to a different thing, then of course you can go back to your performances. The thing is that you're going to need to find it. Of course, it's right here, but maybe if you use a different name, you're going to need to scroll. So when you save performances, you can save them as categories. And the last one, the 16, when you are finding a performance, is going to be user performances. And notice that you don't have it there. I have just a couple of testings, I did a million years ago. On the 16, is going to be the user performances, but it's kind of not showing there. Okay, so let me just kind of show you this. So we are going to be going again. I'm going to be finding our ampersand and 0. This is my performance, right? So again, once you already saved it on the memory, you can do right again. And it says press right to overwrite or shift right to save a new. So this is not protected, and we can, make changes and just do right, and it will just, overwrite whatever we have. Now, if you go to the next page, notice that you have a lot of pages right there. If you go to the next one, and we're going to maybe talk about this later, but what we care right now is the second one. And this is about the metadata. If you want to find this on the manual, it's going to say metadata. So you mainly have 2 categories to choose from. Now, when you go right there and you do enter, it will give you some options. You know what this is? Is a base patch, or maybe which category you're going to be putting this. And I don't know, I'm going to be putting it in, base, just to say something. And the next one is the one we care when we when we try to find the performance. We're going to be going to, and let me find it right there, user. I'm going to do enter, and now it's going to be under the category of base and also on user. So if I go back again, we still have our performance. I'm going to do right because I want to overwrite, and then enter. And now if I change my performance to something else, maybe that one, right? We are on that performance, which is a different performance. If we want to find our performances, we can go to the 16 and we can find the user performances. And if I do enter, we're going to be loading. our performance. So yeah, the metadata, it's just very, very useful. Now remember that we know how to work with performances, but we also have programs. And I've told you before that you can store different things or different parts of your whole performance so you can reuse it later on different patches. So if I go to right, remember that we have the layer A, B, C, and D, and on each one we have, a program, and we might have a wave sequence, and so on and so on and so on. So when you do save, it will ask you what you want to save. In this case, it's going to be performance, but no, I don't want to save the performance. I want to save something else. And notice that you get a lot of options. Some of the things right here, we need to talk about them, but we are not there yet. So for example, we can even save what we do on the timing lane or shape lane when we get to wave sequences. You can do set list. We're going to talk about this on the next video. But then again, if you take a look right here, it says program. So if we made a program on the layer A, we can just save that program and then load it within programs. I'm going to do enter. So this time we are going to be saving a program. So the information changes right here. It's going to ask you, okay, so you want to save the program from which layer? The A, the B, the C, and the D. And you just can, select which different program you want to store. And then you go right here. You're going to be changing the name. And I'm going to be doing the same thing. Okay, so this is my name, all A's. Pretty easy to spot. So when we save this program that we have on the layer A, this program will be available to use on different patches. So I'm going to be doing enter, but remember that before, you are going to need to add the metadata. If not, it's just going to be a little bit hard to find. And I'm just going to, maybe put it on leads. I guess it's a bass, that one. Or this is a synth, I guess, or some strings. Let me just go to the correct category. It's going to be some strings. And the next one, it's going to be under user. And it's going to be easy to find because it's under user. So once we do that, we go back. And again, it's going to be protected, cannot overwrite. We need to create a new. So shift, and then save, and then enter, and we are going to be saving a new program. So what's the trick right now? If I go to an init performance, we start with a new patch. I don't need to start doing everything from the scratch. Maybe I can go to the layer A, I'm going to do enter, and trying to load a program that we already saved. You can choose a lot of different programs, but we can go to our A program and reuse it on a different patch. So this is going to be the strings we did before. I'm going to go back to here, and you know what? I'm going to be loading our performance, the one we did, not the program. Let me just go to home, and I'm going to go there at the top. We're going to be selecting a performance, and if I go to the user one, we're going to use our ampersand and 0. And this is going to be, the performance we created minutes ago. Now, what I want to do right here, I want to keep moving forward to get out of this section, and I want to start covering something a bit more fun, and we will start with the filters. So each different layer, A, B, C, and D, they have access to their own filter right here. They have access to their own amp and their own pitch and their own LFO and effects. So in this case, we need to talk about the filters. And now all of this just looks very simple for all the things I just mentioned. There's a lot under the hood right here, hidden on, menus. But right now we need to just cover the filter. So this is a very straightforward filter. It just works like a filter. Now, of course, right now we are in the layer A, and we have that, strings that we've been using. Right, so pretty simple. Now, of course, as soon as you move this knob, it's going to take you to the menu of the filter. And again, you have pages. So you have 3. Right now, what we care is about the first page. So this type will toggle through the main, kind of 3 main different types of filters, the Pulse 6, the MS-20, and the high pass filter. As soon as you go and type them, it's just going to show you the different filter. Now, of course, these are modeled filters, so you have different options for these ones. And for the other ones that are just more common, not modeled after something else, you don't have a lot of extra options. You have some, different options. Now, the thing is that when you go to more, right here to more, it's standing on type. So if you go enter right there, you have a lot of extra modes. You have the all the already available, the Pulse 6, but then you have the high pass of the MS-20, and you have a 2-pole and a 2-pole high filter, band reject, a low pass, and you have a lot of different types of filters. You even had to get a multi-filter. We're going to talk about that in a second. So in this case, maybe I'm going to go to the MS-20 because, I kind of like it. So if I play something, of course, what we can do with the cutoff is just cut off frequencies, right? We just cut and then cut. Now, notice on the spectrum I'm showing, you get some peaks right there on the higher frequencies. So this is a ground loop of my, my setup, my house is a ground loop. If I disconnect the USB, that goes away. So if I go to the cutoff, we are just cutting the frequencies. Of course, you have your resonance. This is modeled after an MS-20, so it's gonna be like that. Pretty simple. And then, of course, you have your envelope intensity. We need to talk about that in a minute. So far, pretty straightforward. Now, if I go back to the types and I go to enter, notice that maybe you have some other options as we discussed earlier. So I'm going to go to the multi-mode and just going to give you a tiny hint of how this works. So you have all the other options, right? So when you go to the multi-filter, you are going to be getting more options. Fun. But then right at the bottom, since this is a multi-filter, you're going to be going through a series of filters and not just one filter. So right now it's custom. So if you go right there and you tap enter, you have different combinations of filters. You have a low pass feeding to a high pass, and then so on and so on and so on. So you have different combinations. Now, when you go to custom, and I'm going to go right here, you're going to be able to kind of go to the next page, and it will just let you select what filter you can do. It's just custom. You can select manually what you want to do. Maybe I'm going to go right there and do, I don't know, a low pass going to a high pass or something like that, something like that. And again, you already have those options right here, but maybe I'm going to go to a band reject. So yeah, you can create your kind of own custom filters. And that's, something pretty unique. Now, of course, I'm not going to go through all the different filters because this is just, this guide is just long enough. I'm going to go maybe to the MS-20. Now, notice, as I told to the Pulse 6, we get some options like gain, unity, less resonance. And if I go to this one, the MS-20, we have the same. But as soon as we go to the other ones that are not modeled after something, those options go away. And it's the same thing if you go to more and you select maybe, I don't know, a standard 2-pole, a low pass. It's the same thing. You don't have those options. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what they mean because it just really matters. First, I'm going to go to the politics, and this is going to be the same thing for the MS-20. Now, one trick, if you're at home and you want to go to the filter and you want to maybe go to the filter and you say, okay, I want to see the filter menu. And you do filter, you're going to be kind of changing the filter type, and you need to go all the way back to the filter you had before. Or maybe if you're in home and you've moved the cutoff, you are indeed going to the menu of the filter, but you're changing the value, and that's not a good thing. So one tiny little trick is that you can just hold enter just like that, and when you move something like that, it's just gonna go and take you to the menu. Let me just go back, take you to the menu, but it's not changing any of the params right here. Same thing if you type right there, it's not going to change it and take you to the menu. Okay, so the Pulse 6 and the MS-20, they have this gain property that you have right here. Now, of course, you have access to do the cutoff from here and get more information of where you're cutting, right? And then you have the resonance, how much you're doing. You can trim and you have an out. And if you're wondering what this is the trim is the volume that goes into the filter, and the out is the volume that goes out of the filter after being filtered. So you can manage how much gain goes in and how much gain goes out. Okay, so then let's go to this gain, unity, less resonance, and then you have loud, less resonance, and then you have normal, 2 oscillator input and 1 oscillator input. So basically you have normal and unity and then loud. So unity and loud are just kind of a more normal emulations. They are tamed a little bit, and all of this shows when you go to the resonance and you go really aggressive. So if I go to loud or unity, if I go aggressively on the cutoff, it's just going to be very resonant, but it's going to be a little bit more controlled. Now, the other options are more kind of faithful to the emulation of the MS-20, which is pretty screamy. So if I go to normal, notice that this is going to scream right away. When I go to up in the resonance, this is not tamed, not controlled. It's just, a normal mode. And maybe you like this, or maybe you want something, a little bit more controlled with the other one. So you can choose right here. So then you get the same for the Pulse 6. But when you go to the other ones, in this case, we have a 2-pole low pass with the with the non-emulation ones. You don't get this option. You get something else called bass. So if I go right here and we are doing a 2-pole low pass, I'm going to go to bass, and you have a tight, you have a full, right? So you have mainly two options. So for now, I'm just going to go to full. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to do a lot of cutoff, and I'm going to play a low kind of a frequency, something like that. You can see it right there. And I'm going to go up in resonance. You can see it on the spectrum. I'm just showing the spectrum right now, and I'm going to go up in resonance and just go there. So we have a frequency right there going crazy. Notice how it moves up and down. So let me just adjust this. There you go. So the full is going to be more aggressive with the bass part of the the frequency spectrum. It's a bit more reactive to the resonance, and you can see that it's just a bit more aggressive. Now the tight is going to control this a little bit better. Notice that right now it's just not the same thing. It's just a bit more controlled. We cannot hear it because it's just very, very low, but we can see it on the spectrum. The difference between full and the difference between tight. So tight, again, is just going to control the low a little bit more. Now this depends on what you're doing, what you're building, or what you're using. Now if I go right here to maybe all the other types, and maybe go to the 4-pole, because you have a 2-pole and then a 4-pole, I'm going to enter that one, and notice that you have more options. The whole synthesizer is just like this. You change a tiny setting and you get more options. You get more and more and more. So that's why, this whole tutorial and course, actually it's a guide. It's pretty long. So we have the bass, and this works exactly the same. And then we have the resonance type right here at the bottom. It's only for the 4-pole types. Now, whenever you go to standard, and I'm going to go 1 octave up, this is just going to be very simple. So when you are on the standard mode, this means that this works on kind of a normal mode. So if you go to the other one, and notice that you only have 2 options, the high is going to be a bit more resonant. Oh, I made a mistake right there. Let me just go back to the type. Notice that it's a little bit less reactive. I mean, the standard's less reactive to the resonance. Yeah, so that's what it means. It's just tiny little change that might affect your sound. Okay, so just like any standard synthesizer, you have access to the envelope intensity, which is how much modulation you will be applying, or how you will modulate the cutoff. So this is, of course, will decide how much modulation, and then the envelopes right here will decide how you move the cutoff. So if I kind of do it, put it on 0, and I play something, I want this cutoff to move something, like that. So this, of course, this is going to be working. So if I go right here, I'm using the MS-20, I'm not doing resonance, and I'm just, cutting a lot of frequencies right here. So what I want to do, I want to go up on the intensity, and this is how much of that envelope we are using, right? So right now we need to talk about envelopes. So you get a filter envelope, an amp envelope, and a pitch envelope, and then this one, but we need to talk about this one later. Now notice that the filter and the amp and the pitch are pretty much the same, and they actually are the same. It's the same interface, but they control different things. In this case, I need to go to the filter one. So of course, I'm not going to be talking about how ADSR works. I'm going to assume that you already know how ADSR works, just to, skip some parts, because this guide is just already super long. So if you don't know how the ADSR works, go to the web and see what is ADSR, and you will find a million tutorials and guides about that. Okay, so in this case, it's going to control the attack, the decay, the sustain, and the release. And I'm going to do something like that maybe. So a little bit of release, and maybe on the decay, I'm going to go there. So now, of course, we are using this much. We are doing that much intensity. If I go all the way up, it's just going to be a bit more aggressive. If I do less decay, it's just going to be a bit shorter. Right, so pretty simple, just a standard ADSR control. Now, we have more. Notice at the top that you have 1, 2, and 3 different pages. So if I do shift and I go to the next one, it's going to let you adjust the curves for the envelope, for the attack, decay, and release. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to do a little bit of attack just to show you how this works. I'm going to do a little bit of sustain so we can see the decay, the attack, and the release. If I move on to the next one, so if I go right here and play something, notice that it will just change. Actually, I don't need to play it, but it will change the curves. This is what this does. And you get line here, or you get that. Now, if you go to the other one, to the decay, you get the same thing. It's going to have that tiny curve, or it's going to be more linear. Same thing with the release. You're going to get linear, or you're going to get the tiny curve. Now, this is, of course, completely up to you. Now, one thing that you need to know is that when you go to attack, notice that it's just moving the attack. And this kind of sucks because you can control the attack from the attack values from there. The thing is that when you move this knob, it's kind of going to the first screen, right? And this is what is happening. I'm on this screen, and if I move it, it's just taking me to the first one. Now, there's a tiny trick. You can go to Shift, and notice that every time I go to the second page, I'm constantly tapping Shift, right? Or holding Shift. So if I tap Shift twice, it's going to hold the Shift for me. So right now, I just don't need to do anything. If I move this, notice that now it's not taking me to the other screen, and it's holding that Shift. So yeah, we can do it like this. So the attack now is going to let me control the curves. And same thing with of course, the decay, though not the sustain. Kind of messed it up right there. I'm gonna do Shift, go to the next one, and we have, of course, control of the decay, and we have control of the release. And just to get out of this mode, you can just tap, and it's gonna get you out of there. Now, this Shift trick works with pretty much everything. If I double tap the Shift, now I don't need to hold the Shift to toggle between different pages, and I kind of messed that up right there. So let me just get out of the Shift and go back to perform. And for example, if we go right here to the next option, I just can double tap the Shift, and I just can toggle between pages, and I don't need to hold it, right? So if I go to the filter right here, notice that we do get a third kind of a section. I'm not going to be talking about this, but I'm going to maybe give you a tiny hint in how this works. So right now, when I press a key, the envelope, it's triggering, right? Makes sense. So what you can do, you can select a different source to trigger the envelope. So right now we are just, using nothing. The only thing we are using is just when we play a key. But if I change this, I can select a different kind of a different section. So we can use the mod wheel, for example, to control that. So now if I play something and I'm going to move the mod wheel by some percent, it's not doing anything, right? Okay. So I'm going to go there, and I'm going to be selecting, okay, so how much we need to move the mod wheel in order to trigger the envelope again. And I'm going to go maybe to 30%, something like that. And you cannot see the mod wheel. The mod wheel is all the way down. I'm just going to play some keys right here, and I move the mod wheel up, and notice it's triggering again. And I'm triggering several times by moving it up and down when I go over 30% of the mod wheel. And that's it. That's pretty much the whole envelope. You have your curves, and you have your values for your ADSR. Okay, so I'm going to be going to the filter envelope and just kind of make an AR type of a thing envelope. We're just going to leave it like that on the filter. Now I'm going to go to the cutoff, and if I do enter and then move this knob, we are on the filter menu. Now remember that we already know how this works. If you go do Shift and hold and go to the next one, it's going to give you the option for the filter modulation. And we already know how this works. This is a representation of how this envelope, will do its job by modulating. Right now we are not doing, a lot. So we already know how that one works, but you have the LFO, velocity to envelope, and then you have the key track option. So this is pretty simple. It works just like a standard subtracted synth. So if you go right here to the LFO, right here at the top, every section, like for example, the filter, the amp, the pitch, and the pan, they have a dedicated LFO to control this section. In this case, since we are talking about the filter, this option, this LFO will control that. So right here, we decide how much LFO modulation we do to the cutoff, to this one. And if I keep going up, at some point, maybe I'm going to go less resonance, so we can maybe see And if I go up, there we go. We can see the modulation and hear the modulation. Right. Now, of course, the LFO will decide how to do this. And right here you have very kind of a different controls, specific controls. You can go slower or you can go faster. So we're going to be talking about LFOs in a minute. But yeah, from within this screen, if I move the intensity, it's going to take us there. We are going to be deciding how much of that envelope we are doing. And you can go very aggressive, or just less aggressive. Pretty simple. Now notice that when I move this, I'm kind of to get all the way to the top, I need to do a lot of scrolling. And that sometimes, it sucks. But what you can do, you can go to enter, hold it, and move this knob, and this will go, much faster. It's going to take you there, in a more easier way. Okay, so we already know how the envelope works. In this case, the LFO, sorry. In this case, remember that you can also go to negatives. Right, depends on the LFO. But in this case, I'm just going to go back to 0. We are not going to do any modulation. So I'm going to go to the intensity, and I'm going to maybe put it right here. So we are not doing a lot of intensity, right? So it's going to sound pretty dark. Maybe that was too much. Maybe something like there. So then we have this control, which is the velocity to envelope. So this, of course, will modulate this envelope intensity, or will do more cut of modulation with the envelope if we press the key softer or, harder. And this is velocity sensitive. So I'm going to go all the way up. And remember, we can do enter and then all the way up. So if I do soft, it's going to be, let me just do something like that. I'm going to press the key very softly, right? So we get it. And it's very dark, because I'm playing very soft. Now I'm going to do it harder. So that's what it means. The velocity will just be reactive. So the envelope intensity is going to be reactive to the velocity. Now, of course, right now I'm going really aggressively. So we can, it's a little bit more obvious. So then you have the key track option right here. So this is going to make your keys reactive to whatever key is that you're playing. For example, if I go to lower keys, and right now we are at 0, all the filter, the filter and the cutoff and everything else is just reacting to whatever image I'm playing, but it's kind of reacting the same way to lower frequencies or higher frequencies. It's just reacting the same. So the key track is just going to invert that. So if I go maybe a bit more aggressive so we can really hear the difference, and I go to lower keys, the lower keys are going to be low. But if I go to higher keys, notice that the filter is a little bit different. We can hear a lot of the filtered frequencies, the higher frequencies, and the low, we get, a lot more cut right there. And if I, go all the way down so we can see the difference, maybe go to 0 right there. If I go to high frequencies, notice that they are much darker. And it's because, again, the key track, what it will do, it will just do something like that on your keyboard. So higher keys will sound brighter and lower keys will just sound a little bit darker. And this is by, of course, modulating or just kind of adjusting your cutoff. So then, of course, this key track, by default, it's something that you get on not pretty much, but on a lot of synthesizers. It's a very standard feature that you can find even on the Minimoog, Now, I'm going to go to the next one, and this is not a very standard feature. I'm not going to show you how this works, but just, again, I'm going to give you a tiny hint. Notice that you have a low scope, a low mid scope, a mid-high scope, and then you have, everything that is above that. And notice that you have its key, and then key, and then key. So this what will do, it will divide your keyboard on 3 different parts. And what you can do, you can decide how much the key track is going to affect maybe everything below, everything that it's on the lows, on the low keyword, the low keys. But then maybe on the high keys, and again, you can select the scope right there. Maybe just select the key, what is going to be the division, and you can decide how much the key tracking will affect. So again, you can divide your keyboard and decide how much the key track will affect it. And this, of course, this filter key track works with whatever amount you do right here. If you're doing nothing right here, you're not going to get a lot out of this. Now, this is maybe I'm going to be expanding on the next, maybe on the third video, because it's something very specific. And right now we need to keep moving forward so we can keep learning the next parts to get to the wave sequence. So that's it. You have this. You have, of course, the modulation, and you have the filter controls. And we kind of covered all of this. Now notice that at the bottom you have key track, and then you have octave, and then you have pitch, and then you have tune. So this section belongs to the pitch that we are going to be talking right now. But the key track belongs to this section. So if you do shift and you move the key track, there you go. You don't need to do the encoder anymore. It's just going to move the key track, but you need to hold shift. If not, it's just going to take it to the cutoff, right? So make sure you do shift. So you really need to pay attention to the blue options, or the blue tags that you have right here. Now, right now, notice that we have a pitch envelope, but we don't have a pitch section. But we do. Is going to be the shift and this controls. Okay, so now we need to talk about the pitch. Now, this is going to be very simple. Now, the pitch is hidden within the filter controls. So when you do shift and you move either the resonance or the intensity, is going to take you to the pitch menu. Now, of course, on the pitch menu, you can move or you can control the octave or the main tune. Of course, if I'm going to go right here and I play a key, the octave is just going to be changing the octaves. You can, of course, transpose, and this is by semitones. And then the tune is going to be pretty much by cents. So very small, very small values. Now remember that you can do shift and use the knobs that you have available right here. When you do shift and you move this, it's going to move the octave control. Or if you do this one, the intensity is going to move the tune right there. So in this case, I'm just going to go and leave it to 0. And same thing with the octaves. It's going to go back to the beginning. Now then you have the slope. Now the slope is a little bit weird, but it will do pretty much, it will kind of offset whatever is that you're doing on your keys. If you play a C minor triad, like C, 1, 3, and then 5, something like that, maybe you're not able to see the keys. I much prefer to show you the menu, focus right there. But right now, if I play C, 1, 3, 5, I'm just getting that. Now the slope is just gonna modify how that behaves. It's just gonna change how this works. So if I do it right now and I play the same keys, they sound different, and it's because it's changing that relationship. Notice that it sounds a little bit detuned, and it's I'm playing always the same keys. And if I go lower, it's just changing all of that. So this is how it works. Is a nice just an extra option that you get on this one. By default, 1 is going to be whatever you play right here is what you get. So pretty simple, right? So then you have your portamento. So of course, portamento is something that you get on a lot of synthesizers. It's a pretty simple thing. The note will, of course, glide. It's kind of your glide control. On most synthesizers, you have a knob to do this. Since of course, this has a lot of things going on the front panel. You don't have a dedicated section. This is kind of hidden within the menu, and it's going to be right here. So right now we have portamento off. So if I turn it on, what this will do, it will just glide. Now, of course, if I play a key, nothing is going to happen because the portamento needs some timing. It needs to know how much time that glide is going to take. So if I do something like that, for example, maybe let's just go a little bit more aggressive. So I'm going to go to 3, something like that. So if I play a key, it's going to glide the notes. Pretty simple standard behavior when it comes to portamento. Now, if I play a lower key, it's going to take some time to go there. And if I play a higher key, remember the last time we played was the lower key. So it's going to take more time to get to the higher key because, the keys are very kind of separate from each other. Now, of course, this will matter in a second. So, of course, you could set your time right here and you have your portamento on, but then you have your fingered option. So this is pretty simple. Right now, if I play a key, it will glide. Same thing right here, same thing right here, same thing right here. Now, the fingered, it means if we turn it on, it means that if we play a key and we are not holding any other keys, it will not glide. Notice that it's just not gliding. So in order to glide, I need to hold down a key, and if I play a new key, then it will just do the gliding. Right? So pretty simple. That's what it means. And for now, I'm just going to turn it off. Now, then you have this option, which is the constant rate. So constant rate, it means that the times are relative to the distance of the keys. So if we play keys that are really close, it will just glide faster. And separate keys is just going to take more time, just like we did before. If I play this key and we need to glide to this one, since they're very close, they will just, it will just glide pretty fast because we are playing kind of a very close together keys. But if I play this one and then I play something right here, it's going to take a long time to glide. So that is the constant rate. Now the other one is going to be constant time. So notice that now it's just changing seconds per octave to seconds. This means that it doesn't care about the distance between the keys. It will always it will always glide by that time. So if I do a lower key, it's going to glide using those controls, those values. And if I do a higher key, it's going to take the same amount of time. So by doing this, you just always are gliding by the same amount of time. It doesn't matter if you're playing a lower key and then you're playing a higher key. It will always glide the same. So, okay, so that's, your portamento. I'm going to, for now, turn it off. Now, of course, we already know the filter, and we know that on the filter we have a second section. If you remember, we go move the cutoff just a little bit, and I go to the next section. We have the filter modulation. Well, on this case, if we go to right here, the pitch, we have this second page, and this is going to be about the pitch modulation. Now, if we go right there at the bottom, you have the different sections for the LFO. So you have a dedicated pitch modulation, pitch LFO for this. And it's kind of pre-wired to work with the pitch. Now, if we go back to the pitch and go to the second menu, we can decide how much LFO we can do from this one. So if I go, notice that we are getting that LFO modulation. Pretty simple. And if you're in the pitch modulation, you can decide, of course, how fast you go and other options that we will discuss on the next, on the next thing. We're going to be talking about that in a second. But for now, that's where you select the LFO values that you're going to be using. Now, then, of course, you have an envelope, and the envelope is going to be right here. So since you get an envelope for the filter, you have an envelope for the pitch. Now, of course, this will modulate the pitch in some fashion by using the envelope. And I'm going to go somehow aggressive, maybe not that much. Maybe going to go there. And right now, if I play a key, maybe it was too aggressive. So let me just do less. There you go, and that's a little bit more normal. Now, of course, what it's doing, it's listening to the envelope of the pitch that we have right here. So, of course, this is how much you're going to be using of that envelope, and you can relate this value to the envelope intensity for the cutoff. The only thing is that we don't have a physical knob. We just can do it from here. But if we go to pitch, it's going to be the same envelope that you have on the filter. It works the same way. So right here, you will need to go right there and just modify whatever you need to modify in order to do that modulation. Of course, I'm going really aggressive. Let me just do a little bit less. I'm gonna go there and just do a little bit less. There we go, just a little bit more normal. So if I go back to the pitch, again, this works just like the filter envelope. It's the same deal. If I go to the next page, remember that we have the curves. Works exactly the same. And the next one, of course, is going to be the trigger that we already discussed on the filter. So if I go back right here, we know that we can modulate with an LFO, and we can use the envelope to do that modulation. So then we have the velocity to envelope, and this works exactly the same way we have on the filter. Whatever velocity we do, and for now I'm just going to go way down this, so we don't do a lot. And I'm going to go up on this one, and this one works just like the filter. If I play very softly, the modulation is going to be a little bit less aggressive. And if I play, let me just do it something like that. So there you go. I'm going to go and stand right there. If I play very softly, we get that, modulation with the envelope. But if I play hard, it's super aggressive. So that's what this control, of course, means. So I'm going to go down on everything, just going to go everything to 0. So we have the, what we had before. And then you have your bent up and your bent down. So this is, pretty simple. You're going to be deciding how much you're going to be doing when you do the bend, when you do the pitch bend up, or when you do it down. And you have a lot, so you can go really aggressive on this one. And notice it goes to minus or it goes to positive. So it's just, pretty useful. So I'm going to leave it on default, which is +2 and then -2. So notice that some of the options, even if we go to the pitch and then we go to the filter, they're just kind of maybe repeating themselves, at least on this screen. If we go to the cutoff and I go to the modulation, it looks pretty much the same. Of course, we have some other different values, very relative to the pitch or the filter, but the interface and what we can do is pretty much the same. So this is going to be the same idea throughout the whole synthesizer. As you move on and you learn more sections, some of the interfaces or pages are going to just repeat themselves. So it's going to be a little bit easier to learn as you move forward. So of course, like on any synthesizer, whatever you do, it will go through an amp section. So you can handle, of course, how the volume goes out. Now, of course, in this case, we work with layers. We don't have one single sound that goes out. We have 4. So of course, you get an amp section for each different layers for A, B, C, and D. So in this case, the amp is going to be right there. And you could be confused that this, of course, belongs to the filter, but no, this belongs to the amp section. So right now, if I play something, it's going to be like that. Now, if you move this, it's going to take you to the amp configuration, the amp page. So this will modify the level. It's just going to be going up in volume or just going down in volume. Now, what happens if you want to access to maybe you're on home and you want to access to this configuration, to this page, and you want to modify the value? Remember, you can do hold enter and move the knob, and it's just going to take you there without altering the values. Now, another thing right here, notice it says pan. And right here, you have that, that visual control. And notice it says CO. So CO means that it's not a key. It's C stands for center. So right now, everything is just centered. But if you do shift and you move this knob, it's going to move it to the left. And of course, it's going to move it to the right. Right, so for now, I'm just going to put it on the center. Now, of course, you have other options. Now, you have your amp LFO, and your amp LFO is going to be this amp LFO. Remember that we have an LFO for the amp. So, of course, if I go to that control, I'm going to do enter and move this so we can go to that. We can decide how much LFO we are going to be getting from this LFO, how much level from the LFO, or how much we want to allow. So, of course, since this is controlling volume, the amp controls volume, what you get is a tremolo. Right? So pretty simple. So that's it. That's what you can do with the amp LFO. If I go all the way down, we just get nothing. Right, so notice that it says pan LFO. So you get a dedicated LFO just for the panning. So right now we are not doing anything, but if we move or we do something, notice that this will just kind of LFO this control, the pan. And it's just going to go from left to right. And how it's going to go, of course, you need to go to the pan right here and decide how this will go. And the next section is going to be about LFO, so we're going to learn how this works. But pretty simple. You're just going to be enable this from here, and you can do minus or you can go to go to positive values. 0, of course, will do nothing. And again, I'm just kind of moving or shifting this by mistake. Now then you have the other option, which is going to be the random pan. So this is, again, random pan. Notice if I play different keys, sometimes it's going to be on the left, sometimes it's going to be on the right. It depends, of course. It's random, right? So that's the whole idea. So then you have your velocity control. Now, of course, this one works just like the filter and just like what we did on the pitch. This will, how hard or how soft we play the keys, this one will affect how the sound goes out. And this one will, of course, affect volume. Okay, so if I go all the way up, which is a little bit absurd, but if I go all the way up and I just play the keys softer, we get a very low volume. But if I go hard, we get more volume. So this is, how it works. Of course, you can go to positive and negative. And then, of course, you have your key tracking, and the key tracking works exactly the same than the filter and the pitch. You can decide how much you do right there. And then again, you have your key track control. So you can, of course, divide the keyboard and decide how the key track will react on different zones. So this is like the main page of the amp. But of course, we have an amp envelope, and by default, this will kind of show you the envelopes, and this will shape how the sound goes out. It's just an amp envelope. Right now we have nothing, but if I start modifying the envelope, notice that the tag will give us a ramp, and again works just like any other standard envelope. If we add more release, you can have a lot of release right there. Right, so pretty simple. Notice that right here we have the velocity. So in the case of the amp, if we are standing on the amp, it can directly affect the velocity from here. If we go to the filters, we can directly affect the velocity to envelope from here. There's something I forgot to tell you. And if we are on the pitch, it's the same deal. We can affect how the velocity and the envelope will affect it. But in the case of the amp, remember, this one works the same way than the other envelopes. We have the ADSR controls, but we also have the curves, and we also have the trigger, just like we have on the filter and the pitch. Okay, so we know that for each category, in this case filter or amp or pitch or pan, we have a dedicated LFO that will just interact with those ones. And if we go, of course, to the cutoff and we go to the second page, we can decide, of course, how much of the filter LFO we will do, or the amp LFO, or the pitch LFO. Of course, we need to talk about what's going to happen when we go to the LFO. Now, one thing you need to notice, if we go to the filter, the page of the filter LFO is going to look like this. If I go to the amp, it's going to look the same. If I go to the pitch, it's going to look the same. And if I go to the pan, it's going to look the same. So once we learn one, we learn them all. Okay, so I'm going to go to the filter and I will do some filter modulation with the LFO. Now, remember that when we are on the filter menu, we needed to manually kind of go right there and provide some intensity. Since the filter LFO, it's already pre-wired to the filter modulation, we can do it from here. And notice that it will take us there, and we don't need to go to the menu to decide how much we want to do for the filter modulation LFO. We just can do it from here. Much easier, right? So for now, I'm just going to do that, something like that. So when we go, again, in this case to the filter, you have some options right there. So right here, this is going to be your frequency, how fast you go. If you go slow or you go super fast. Right, so again, pretty simple. Now, right now, by default, you're going in hertz. In a minute, I'm going to tell you how to use subdivisions. But first, I would like to go to see, to inspect the waveforms. And if you take a look, notice that right now it says waveform and then curve. So when you go to the shift, hold shift, and you go to the waveform, you just can toggle between a lot of different waveforms. And it gets crazy, just crazier and crazier, and you get a lot of different waveforms. So cool. So in this case, I'm just going to use the saw down. Right? So we can really hear that is a saw. All right. So the start of phase, it's actually very standard on any synthesizer, maybe digital synthesizer. You can offset the phase of the waveform. So if I go right here, notice that as soon as I press a key, it's just doing some modulation. Now, if I start offset the phase, notice that the waveform will start from a different place. And that's what you get, of course, when you offset the phase. Now, right now we are doing by a lot, but you can go, of course, all into negatives. And the modulation will start a little bit differently. So that's what you get, when you offset the phase. And if I go to 0, the modulation starts right away. And right now, if I do something like this, it's going to do like a decay and then start over. And I'm showing you something a little bit more visual. And I'm showing you this from the application, the companion app that you get from WaveState. You can connect this to the computer and download the editor, and you can manage it from your computer. Right, so that's the phase. Of course, you have the offset. Now, you might be thinking that maybe offset, it's, offsetting the phase, but not really. Not right now. And maybe if I go to maybe not the filter, and I'm going to go intensity of nothing on the LFO. So no LFO modulation. I'm going to go to the pitch. It's going to be a little bit easier to see. If I go to the pitch, of course, the pitch is just going to start to move up and down, right? And we can kind of hear that. I'm pressing this key. Now, if I go slower on the frequency, there we go. So, okay, so I'm playing this key. And when I play it, the LFO will kick in and we are playing this key. So the LFO is going to go up and it's going to go down. But the main center is going to be this frequency, this key I'm playing. So the LFO again is bipolar. It's going to go up and it's going to go down. It's bipolar. And you can see it right there on the screen. I'm going to change the waveform and I'm going to go maybe to select a sine wave. It's going to be a little bit easier to hear. So right there on the screen, I'm showing you the live companion app. So if I go to the offset, what this will do, it will just turn this positive and negative into all the way positive or all the way negative. So what's the difference? It's gonna a little bit hard to hear. So right now we are going, if we go to 0, we are going up and we are going down in pitch. Because notice that that line that we have right there, it's on the right center. So it goes up and then it goes down to negatives. But when we offset this, of course, right now it starts right here and it only knows how to go up and then go back. So the lowest point is going to be this one. So we are just converting the LFO to a positive LFO, which is called a unipolar LFO. Now if we go the other way, this is still going to be a unipolar LFO, but it's just going to go into negatives, not positives. Now this is from this key and then it goes like this on the lower pitch starting from this key. Right, so we have this option random and it's off by default. So right now, every time that we play a key, notice that we always start on the same place. Maybe it's going to be a little bit obvious. I'm going to go all the way down on the mod right here on the pitch and I'm going to do the filter. And I'm going to do shift and select a different waveform just like a square. And it's going to be pretty obvious. Now, okay, so if I play a key and I just kind of do it like this, notice that the sound, it's always the same. It starts the same. And it's because every time that we play a key, the envelope, or the LFO in this case, not envelope, the LFO is just going to re-trigger and it's going to start over and the phase always starts from the same place. It starts from here, then goes up, or maybe goes up and then goes down. So when we play keys, it will always start the same because the phase is always the same. But what you can do, you can go to random and turn this on and notice that this will remove the start phase because now it's going to be random. So every time I play a key, it could be up or down. So notice that now if I do it, sometimes the cutoff, it's all the way down or all the way up. Right? It's going to be different every time because the phase is random. So that's what it means. So let me go to a sine wave right here so we can make it a little bit more visual. So you have more options, amazingly. You have the curve and you have the fade. Now the curve will mess with the curve of the waveform. You cannot see it on this screen. That would be, really cool to see kind of an animated or, some visual reference of how we are shifting the curve. Now I'm going to show you the companion app. On the companion app, you get it. You can see how much of the curve you're doing. So I'm going to be playing something and remember that we are doing this. It doesn't matter. Now, if I shift the curve, notice that this will modify how the LFO or the shape looks. And of course, this will just alter how it's going to move because the shape is different. You're modifying the curves of the waveform. So this is what it does. If we go maybe to a different, maybe to a different waveform, let's go to the saw. It's going to be a little bit more obvious. If I go to the curve and do the same thing, notice that it's going to be much shorter. And if I go to the other way, we have that tiny curve, but it's going to go up. Right, so this is what you can do with the curve. Now then you have the fade. Now the fade, it's again another very simple and kind of a common feature that you get. So as soon as I play a key, notice that the modulation will kick in. Maybe I don't want to do this. Maybe I want to wait for a certain amount of time before the modulation kicks in. In this case, I'm going to go, and remember you can do enter and go into greater, to greater values. I'm going to do 9 seconds, which is a lot. So if I play a key and I'm, doing this, so it's very obvious. So if I play a key, we get no modulation, right? So, of course, the modulation will start to kick in and will fade in, when this 9 seconds. So I'm going to be playing something. And then, of course, the modulation will start, fade. This is going to start to fade in until we get to full amplitude after 9 seconds. So I'm going to go right here and just get the fade all the way down. I don't want to fade. So we get that, that modulation. So right now we can go fast as this, or we can go slower. Pretty simple. But what if I wanted to sync it to something? So right here, you can go tempo on, and it will be synced to whatever tempo or BPM that you're using. It will go into subdivisions. So now, of course, you can use the subdivisions based on whatever BPM the synthesizer is using. Now, then you get an X1, and this is something that you will get on pretty much a lot of options, even on wave sequencing. So what you can do, well, let me just go right here. What this will do, it will scale whatever subdivision you have right there. So if you have this one, it's going to do ×2. So now it's like combining 2 of this. So of course the time is going to be slower because you're just kind of making it longer. And same thing if you go to 3 and then 4, and it just works like that. So a lot of the options you have on this synthesizer that we are going to be discovering as we move forward, you have a multiplier right there. That's going to always work the same. So right now, of course, we know that we can go into frequencies when you turn, we can go into subdivisions when you turn the tempo on. Now, the problem is what's the tempo? So, of course, if you don't see it on the screen, it's right here. You have a tempo, a tap tempo, and it's just, of course, blinking the whole time. So if you tap that button, you don't just tap it many times, because if you do it like that, you're going to be, of course, setting your tempo, right? So in this case, I just want something like that. So right here is going to take you to the performance setup. Remember this screen? We already talked about this screen. If I go right here to the perform and you do shift, you're going to be toggling through the kind of the global configuration, and the performance setup, you're going to be able to set your tempo. So if you wanted to set it right there, you can go and set the tempo manually, or you can do the tap tempo if you wish. So completely up to you. Let's do 110. Now, we are enabling this from the, of course, the interface right here, the menu. But notice if I turn it off and on, this light is going off and on. So, of course, with this one, it's just that. You can enable tempo sync on or just tempo sync off. But then you have this option, this kind of a weird option. So this sync notes is actually kind of a special. So in this case, I'm going to go to the LFO. I'm going to do nothing on the LFO. So we have no modulation. And I'm going to do this with pitch because it's going to be super obvious. So I'm going to do some LFO. Something like that. So I'm going to be using this main keys. So I'm going to be playing something, and we can see on the spectrum how the sound is just moving like that because we are modulating pitch. Pretty simple. So, but we are holding just one key. If I do more, because this is, of course, on poly mode, we can do many keys. Now, I'm going to try to do it on a different time, not to sync. So notice that the spectrum is just moving a little bit differently. And if I do a new one, and then a new one, and then a new one, notice that the frequencies are not synced. They are just kind of doing their own thing. And this is how this works by default. By default, everything that you do, each voice, it has its own LFO. So if I do this is going to be moving in some fashion. So as soon as I play it, the LFO will start for that voice. Now, when I play this one, the LFO, a different LFO, will be applied to this voice. So now we have 2 LFOs, one for this voice and one for this one. But they could be totally different. If I do this one, the same thing is going to happen. So now we have 3 voices following their own LFO. That's why we have this kind of a movement between the different, keys. Now, what this sync notes will do, when I enable this, I'm going to be playing one key, and that's my LFO, right? We go up, and we go down. Now I'm going to be playing a new key. So what the sync notes will do, it will say, okay, if I'm using an LFO, already I'm going to be sync this voice to that LFO. So now every time we play a key, it's going to be synced to one single LFO, which is a lot different than doing this, right? So with this one, if you play 3, you have 3 voices following a different its own LFO. But if you sync notes, you have 3 voices following one single LFO. Okay, so let's go quickly through the effects section. Now, it's very easy, but there are a few things that you should know. So right here, notice that it says program effects. But the keyword right here, it's program. And we already know what the program is. So it means that these three ones, the pre-effects, mod effects, and delay, they belong to each different layer. So you could have 3 different effects, doing different things on each different layer. But you have a master reverb. And this reverb will apply for the whole unit, the whole patch, the whole performance. Now, the reverb, again, is global, and we have a hidden feature right here on the reverb that we are going to be talking about we're going to be talking about later, is the master EQ. So I'm going to go to pre-effects. I'm going to tap it, and it's going to take us there. Now, right now, if the light it's not on, just like the layers, we are not doing anything. We need to either double tap to turn it on, and now we are using, that pre-effects, or double tap to turn it off. Now, what we can do again is shift and tap it to turn it on, or shift and tap to toggle it off. All right, so let's go by stages. I'm going to go to the pre-effects. Now, this one is going to be simple. And right from the start, what you can see when you go to the pre-effects or the mod or the delay is that you have a type and you have a preset. So the way that this works with effects is just a little bit weird. And you have, again, the type and the preset. So the type, if I go right there, is going to be the type of effect that you're using. And we are on pre-effects. So you get some different types of effects. You don't get all. You get compressors, EQs, a ring modulator, a tremolo, and a wave shaper. You don't get, a million. And notice that if I go, and a decimator and an EQ, and, a couple more. But notice that if you go all the way up, it's going to say compressor all and EQ all. How weird. Now, I'm going to go right here, and I'm going to be selecting compressor all. And then you have the preset section. When you go to the preset section, it's going to show you a long list of presets. And this is how it works. Let me just break it down. If I go to compressors all and I go to presets, it's going to show me all the presets that we have for all the different types of compressors. So let me just select that one. If I go back to the type and select that one, we have a modern compressor, we have a red compressor, and then we have nothing else. So we have those compressors. So when we go to compressor all, it's showing us the preset for the 2 compressors that we have available. So the presets are kind of a part of the actual effect. And maybe you're kind of saying to yourself, I don't like to use presets. I like to select the compressor and just, adjust the values to get what I want. Well, this is not how it works. You need to select an effect, in this case, maybe a compressor, and then the preset will give you different options that you can tweak. Now, in this case, I'm going to go maybe right here and just show you how it works. So I'm going to go to red compressor. If I select that one and I go to presets, it will give me, not a lot of options. And it's just giving me a visual representation, or it's giving me a list of all the patches or presets that we have available just for the red compressor. If I select something else, let me just go there. I'm going to go and enter, and I go to a modern compressor. We are going to have other options. And all these presets, notice that they belong to the modern compressor and not to the red compressor. So changing of course, the type and the preset matters. So notice that you have the wet and the dry, the input trim, and the gain adjust. So some options or some effects will give you different options. For example, if I go to an EQ, you don't get the adjust gain. You get just input trim. But the wet and dry and the input trim are going to be kind of a standard for all the different effects that you get right here. So in this case, you get the wet and the dry. So, what is this? So it's the blend control. And notice that you have a dedicated knob to do this. So it's going to be all the way wet, or you can select some in-betweens or go to dry, which is pretty much you're not doing anything. If I go all the way, it's going to be all the way wet. Now then, of course, you get your input trim. Now, since sound, it's going through the pre-effects first. If it's really loud or it's, it's really loud, it's going to affect how the pre-effect works, especially when you use a compressor. If you're feeding a lot of volume or going up in gain, this is going to affect the compressor, so you can trim it down and see how the compressor reacts. And then, of course, since this is a compressor, you can adjust the gain, the output of the compressor. Now, notice that you have something called right here, effect type. So let's say that you are right here and you want to change the type. Well, by tapping this one, it's going to stand you on the effect type. And same if you're on perform, if this one is selected and you do effect type, it's just going to take you and position you right there. So you can just maybe change the type. Now, if you do shift and you do type, it's going to take you to the preset. All right, so pretty simple, pretty understandable. Okay, so let me just, select that one. Now, of course, you have more options. Notice that you have 2 pages. Of course, you can select type preset, but if you go to the next one, it depends on what you select. That's why you get the type and the preset again. And there's no difference between the first screen and the second screen. It's just the same thing. So, but you have access to change it from here. So right here on each different effect, you can change up to 3 different paramps, and the paramps will depend on the effect that you're using. That's why I'm saying, why I'm told you that the presets really matter, because you only have 3 different paramps. You don't have more. You cannot, go really crazy and tweak whatever you want on your compressor. You have a very limited amount of options. So in this case, it's going to be the ratio, the threshold, and the attack and release. But if you go to maybe a different effect, let's say an EQ, of course, you're going to have different options, and it's going to have the gain, the frequency, and then the Q. But this one, if I keep changing it, and maybe I go to something else, the options are going to be pretty similar. But of course, how it will react is going to be different, because this one is a peak EQ, and you have other options, a radio EQ. So the presets work with the type, and this is something that you shouldn't avoid. So that's it. You don't have a lot. You have 3 options. You can select between a type and a preset. So I'm going to just kaboom, toggle off, and I'm going to go to the mod effects. And, for now, I'm just going to turn it on. You're not going to listen to it, but notice that it's pretty much the same thing. You get the type, the preset, the wet and the dry, and of course, you have an input trim. And this works the same way. If I go to type, notice that you will get a lot of options. You get the chorus all, flanger all, phaser all, and wah all. So this is a mod effects. So it's all about this, chorus, flanger, phaser, and wahs. When you go to the preset, you need to select the different preset that you want from that one. So again, pretty standard. It works just like the other ones. I'm just gonna select that one. And if I go to the next page, again, will work the same way. You have 3 options that you can change, and then you have the type and the preset. Now, of course, going right here and changing this manually is just a little bit annoying. So, of course, you have a control right here, but it's a combination of shift and this knobs. So notice that this one says edit 1, edit 2 when you do shift, and edit 3 when you do shift. So if I move this one, it's going to modify the first parameter of the edit 1, which is depth, right? Pretty understandable. Now, the other ones is going to be edit 2 and edit 3. So you can either hold the shift and move this one to modify the edit 2, and then this one to do the 3. Or again, you can double tap and it's going to enable the shift, or just hold the shift for you. And you just can, of course, just modify the values this way. So I'm going to go to the delay. Now, of course, the delay works the same way. You have a great type and a preset, a wet and dry, and an input trim, right? And if I go to this one right here, we still have the same thing, works the same way. Now, if I wanted to make more obvious in how this works, let's say that you want a very specific delay. You can go to all, but notice that the delays are very specific. Reversed, stereo, cross delay, and the most obvious example is the tape echo. So whenever you talk about tape echo, you might have multiple heads on a tape echo. So if I do enter, right now, the default preset is going to be a BPM tape 1 head. And you only have 3 options, time, feedback, and timbre. So, of course, right here, if you do time, feedback, and timbre, all of this is going to work with the 1 head tape. But again, what if you want more tapes? We want more heads. So this is a must going to the preset, because on the presets you have a 3-head or you have different combinations of different timings. So that's again how it works. You really need to dive into the presets and and see what you get is a must. If I go to the reverb, I'm going to turn this one off. You get, your nice reverb, and it's just a reverb. You still get your type and you still get your preset, works the same way. And of course, if I go right there, you have your type, your preset, and your 3 default kind of parameters. So notice that right here at the top, you have 1, 2, and the other ones, you have 1, 2, but on the reverb, you have a third option, right? A third page. It's going to be 1, that one. The 2, we already know. And then you have a 3. And the 3 is going to be a hidden EQ that you have available on your synthesizer. And you cannot, it's going to be like right here after the reverb. And this is a master EQ. So again, goes at the end of the chain. And this is just an EQ. So of course, by default is going to be off. You can turn it on. And then again, you can trim it, or, you cannot go up. It's just going to trim. It's going to go down in volume. So what you get right here is a 4-point EQ. So you have a low, a mid, a higher mid, and then a high, right? And I'm going to be showing you some a visual representation of how the EQ looks or what it does. So when you go to lows, you have different options. And again, we are in the low frequency. So we have a shelving EQ, and you can select the frequency that you're going to be working with and how much. So in this case, I'm going to go up, right? And since this is a shelving EQ, it's going to go up that way. Now, of course, if we change it to cut, it's going to cut frequencies. So if I go all the way down, you have a peak EQ. And the peak is just going to be that. It's just going to be a peak. Now, notice again that you can move the frequency where you're going to be cutting, shelving, or peaking. Or actually, the peak is a bell. And right here, when you work with bells, you have a Q. So the Q is going to make it narrow or is going to make it wider, right? Pretty understandable. Now, of course, then you have the other ones. And for now on this one, I'm just going to do a little bit of cutting, right? And I'm maybe going to go right here to 20 hertz, so maybe 50 hertz. And right now, next one is going to be the mid. So the mid, of course, is going to be the mid frequencies. Of course, you can shift the hertz, the position of your boost, but notice that it's just a bell EQ. And let me just make it a little bit more obvious. Maybe not that obvious. All right, so of course, this is a bell EQ. So what you can do is a Q. You can go narrow or you can go wide. Pretty simple. Next one is the same. Of course, it's going to be for higher frequencies. It's going to be the mid-highs frequencies, or, kind of a high frequencies at that point. 6,000 is high. And what you can do, and again, it's the same thing. You can go up, and of course, you can select your Q and just make it narrow and adjust, whatever frequency you're going to be working with. Now, remember that holding Enter is just going to let you go in, a bit faster. So let's say in this case, I'm just going to be cutting some of that. So you can do something like that. Now then, of course, you have the highs, and this works just like the lows. You can have a shelf, and let me just go back. I'm going to be doing that. We're going to be doing a boost. But if we want, you can cut right like that, or you can do a peak with, of course, some Q. So we need to talk about the mod button right here. And don't skip this one. This is super important for now, for layers, but it's super important for this and for wave sequencing. Okay, so as soon as you go to mod, and we're standing on the layer A, it doesn't matter right now, but notice that it says A mods. So they belong to the layer A. Now, notice right here, you have a lot of pages. So don't sweat it, it's just very simple. So right here, it's telling you no results for showing settings. So it's because we have, we have no modulations so far. So it's empty. Now, if we do shift, right, like that, and we go to the next screen, this is going to be the second screen is going to be a filter for all the mods routings that you created. Now, of course, since you have nothing, it's going to filter nothing. Now, if you go to the next one, it's going to give you something that says mod processor 1, and the fourth one is going to be mod processor 2. This is something that I'm going to be talking about much later on this series because it's not super relevant for now, for us right now. So I'm going to be skipping this and I'm going to keep moving forward. Now, the next one is the mod knobs, and then the next one is going to be the performance mod knobs. And maybe you're wondering, like I did at the beginning when I bought this and I was kind of learning this, is what are the mod knobs and what are the performance mod knobs? So this one's, of course, and what is the difference, between performance and mod knobs? So we're going to talk about that in a minute. But you have all these screens, and this is where you handle the mod knobs and some values and all the modulations that you will create. So how do we do to add a modulation? And it says right there, press mod and then plus and then the page. And actually, the way that this was implemented to add modulations to the matrix is pretty good. It's pretty straightforward, giving all the options and all the things that you can do. So right now, if you want to add a modulation, you need to go to the mod, hold it, and do page plus. Notice that this is plus as well. So it's going to be adding a modulation. I'm holding and I'm going to be pressing plus. So then it says add a new modulation, move the target. So of course you will have a target, which is what you want to modulate. And then you have a source, which is going to be what is going to be modulating that target. So to select something that you want to modulate, and could be, whatever you want. You have, of course, a limited amount of things that you can do, but you can modulate a million things. You need to move some of the knobs that you have available that you want to modulate. Now, you can modulate hidden values within the synthesizer. I'm gonna show you that much later. But in this case, let's say I want to be modulating the filter cutoff. And it's because, it's something that we can really hear when we modulate. So when I move it, is kind of detecting that I moved this one, and it's saying, oh, okay, so your destination is the filter cutoff. That is your modulation. That is what you want to modulate. And it's just going to add it right there. And then it's going to await for you to modulate something, to touch something that will be modulating the cutoff. So I shifted the camera right here so you can see the mod wheel. So of course, it's awaiting for a source. So the mod wheel could be a very good source. So as soon as I move it, it's telling me, okay, so you're going to be modulating the cutoff with the mod wheel. So if that is what you want to do, you just do enter to confirm, and kaboom, your modulation, it's there. So you can change the source if you wish. Now, what you can do, you're going to need to do enter, and it's going to take you to this screen, to the modulation source. Now, we all already been in this screen, and right here, what you can do, if you go right there with the arrows, you can just change between controllers, mod knobs, and generators. And of course, generators are, the envelopes and LFOs and so on. So your mod knobs are going to be these knobs. And then you can select, of course, controllers, like, for example, the mod wheel. Now, in this case, I'm going to keep the mod wheel. So what if you don't want this modulation? You made a mistake. You want to delete it. It says right there, del, shift, and mod. So you press shift, you type mod. It's going to ask you, do you want to, delete it? I'm going to say yes. And kaboom, we are back to the beginning. Now, I'm going to be adding, because I want that modulation, I'm going to be doing the filter cutoff, and I'm going to be moving the mod wheel. That's what we want to do. So you have your intensity. If you and I play a key and I move my modulation wheel, nothing is going to happen until you select how much of that modulation you want to do. So in this case, we are going to be going up by some amount, and notice that it's moving. Now, of course, I'm going to be doing a little bit of cutoff, so it's just a bit darker. So let me go to mod again, and I'm going to be doing something a bit more aggressive. I'm going to do something like that. So, of course, if I press something, I have nothing until I go up on the modulation wheel. Maybe I'm going to go right there. Right, so pretty simple. That's how you can create modulations and add them. Now, of course, right now we are modulating something that we could kind of already modulate with an LFO or with something else. So, of course, what happens if I wanted to add more is the same trick. I'm going to do mod, I'm going to do page, and it's going to ask me, what do you want to modulate? Let's do the resonance, something that we cannot modulate with an LFO or something else, and we're going to do the same trick with the mod wheel. And I'm going to do enter, and that's it. Of course, you need to select how much you want to modulate. And maybe the intensity is going to be something like that. And I'm going to go down in resonance. So as I play something, we go up in cutoff and resonance. Right, so notice that it says resonance 1 of 1, and it's because you can modulate the same parameter with different things. In this case, we are just doing it with, with a mod wheel, but maybe you want to modulate it as well with the mod wheel and maybe, I don't know, an LFO. So I'm going to be adding kind of a second modulation. And I'm going to be showing you a different kind of a way in a second, but I want to kind of modulate the resonance with something else. And I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to move this knob. I'm going to do enter, and we're going to talk about these knobs in a minute. So, but I don't want to do this. In this case, what you can do, you have some other options, and I kind of made a mistake right there. You're going to go to source, and remember that you can go to here and change what, it's going to be controlling. Generators, it's your amp envelopes, your vector, or your LFOs. So maybe I want to modulate this with an LFO. So I'm going to be using the pitch or maybe the filter. I'm going to use the pitch LFO. So I'm going to be entering, and now the pitch LFO that, of course, controls pitch, has nothing to do with the resonance, can control and modulate the LFO, the resonance. So if I go and provide some modulation, notice that we can hear it. And if I go all the way up, or maybe right there, we just can hear the modulation of the pitch LFO on the resonance. So what if you want to modulate an effects? You can do so. Right now, I'm on the pre-effects and you cannot see it, but I'm going to select the reverb, right? I'm on the reverb right now. I'm selecting that one. I'm going to go back to mod, and we are going to be adding a new modulation. So I want to modulate the reverb. I'm going to move the dry and the wet knob that we have available right here. You cannot see it, but we have it right there. I'm going to modulate that knob. So it's the reverb wet and dry. So what you can do again, maybe use the mod wheel. And as we go up, the reverb is just going to keep, growing and growing. So you need to enable the reverb, it needs to be on to see this. So I kind of, didn't add it. So let me just do it again. I'm going to do this, move the mod wheel, and I'm going to be pressing enter. So I'm going to select something like 70 something, kind of aggressive. So if I all the way up, we have less reverb, but as we go up, we have more and more and more and more reverb. Now this depends on how much wet and dry you have in your reverb. I'm going to go low, so it's pretty much dry. And as we go up, of course, the wet and the dry is just going to grow behind the scenes. Okay, so once you go, maybe you're outside of the mod. If you go to mod, the first one is going to show you, maybe your first modulation. But, how do you do to see the other ones? So by holding enter and using the page, it's going to start toggling all the different mods that we created. Go up or just go down on these ones. Now, the problem is that sometimes you are going to be creating a lot of modulations. So you have a way of filtering this. And this, remember, is this screen. It's going to say mod list info. So this is going to be applying some filtering to your mod list. So in this case, it's saying show and then all. So we can change this. So notice that it goes right there, synths and effects, and then it says all right here. But maybe I want to see only the ones that are, tied to the resonance or to the arpeggiator or maybe to the reverb or, whatever it is that you want to search. So in this case, I want to maybe see what the one that is tied to the filter. So I'm going to go to filter and select filter. So now my search or filter criteria is going to be the filter. So if we go to the cutoff, we have that one and we have the resonance. But notice that we don't get the reverb. We only see the cutoff and the resonance, which is part of the filter. So by doing something like this, you can again search by different parameters because maybe you have a lot of modulations. So this is just going to make it easier for you. So in terms of the mod list info, there are a few shortcuts that you need to know. For example, let's say I'm in perform, right? I'm right there at home. So I can do mod and in the minus or the page minus, and it will take you to the filter of the show in mod list. So you're going to, go directly there so you can just find whatever modulation you want. So let's say that I'm going to go right here and maybe, I'm going to go to the controller and select the mod wheel, right? So now we are filtering by mod wheel. But what you can do right here, what if you wanted to maybe go back to nothing? So I can go right here to list. I can go right there. And I don't need to go to the synth and effects and go all the way to all. When you tap the mod on, it's going to take you to all by default. Now, of course, remember that the other shortcut is going to be deleting the modulations, which we kind of already discussed. By holding the shift and doing the mod is going to delete all the modulations, or, the modulation where you're standing. So I'm going to be deleting all the modulations because I want to show you something else. So, okay, I'm going to be adding one more modulation. So what I want to do, I want to modulate the cutoff. And I'm going to be tapping on the pitch. You don't see it. I'm going to the LFOs and tapping on the one that says pitch. And it's going to take me to the pitch LFO. Pretty simple. We kind of already did this. Once I do enter, or, enter, I need to select how much I'm going to be kind of modulating that pitch. And I'm going to be doing something like, I don't know, something like that. So we can really hear it. Maybe I'm doing a little bit too much. There we go. Now we can hear it. So with the pitch LFO, we are modulating the cutoff, right? Pretty straightforward. So okay, I'm gonna go and do a little bit more, maybe. There we go. So of course, right now when I play a key, the modulation kind of instantly, it's kind of kicking in. Now, maybe I don't want this. What I want to do is I want to control it a little bit better. So you can use, or you can create different modulations and control it with something else. Either is a performance knob or maybe the mod wheel. And this is going to be your intensity mod. So right here, it's off, so we are not using it. So if you do enter, it's going to take you to this screen again, so you can select what you want to use to control that modulation. In this case, I'm going to go to the mod wheel, and I'm going to go all the way down to the mod wheel. I'm going to do enter. So now this is controlling the intensity, right? It's a little bit different. The pitch LFO, it's controlling the cutoff by using this intensity, but now the mod wheel, it's using or modulating or deciding the intensity that it's modulating the cutoff. So if I do play, or if I press something, play something, and I go up in the mod, we're going to start to get that modulation. So that's the int mod, intensity mod. So we are modulating the intensity with something else. And you can select different sources, of course. Now, this is going to be very relevant and important when we get to wave sequence. So I've deleted all the modulations, and I'm going to show you something else I kind of forgot to show you. And it's really important. So when you add a modulation, by default, the way we add modulations, we add destinations, is by moving the knob. But what if the thing that we want to modulate is not a knob? Or maybe a button, we don't have it available. So I'm going to go to perform, and I'm going to go to the filter. And maybe you don't see it, it's off screen. I'm going to go to this filter. And notice that we have a lot of options that we don't have available as knobs or buttons. Like, for example, the start of phase. We don't have a dedicated, part on the synthesizer where we can just, tweak the phase and select it as a modulation source. But you can. If you are standing right there and you do mod and you do page, it's going to say, okay, do this, enter the modulate. Well, you don't need it. You just need to enter. And since you were standing there, it's going to recognize that as a modulation destination, and it's just going to pick it up. And then, of course, let's say that I want to use my mod wheel. Doesn't matter. I just want to show you. And this will modulate the LFO, start of phase, blah, 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 and then it's going to do it with the mod wheel. So that's how you, of course, you add modulations or destinations that are not available on the panel. Okay, so let's talk about the mod knobs, and it's going to be the white knobs. Now, the mod knobs are just macros. I know that this looks challenging, but they are just macros. So we can assign a value or something that we want to modulate with this macro, and then we just can run a modulation with this macro. That's all it is. Now, the confusing part is that you get names right here, and these ones could be performance knobs or mod knobs. And I know it's confusing. And if you go right here to the panel, it's going to say mod knobs, and the next one is performance mod knobs. So what is the difference? So the difference is that there is no difference. The names that you have right here, master, timing, or 1 and 2, and so on, they are just suggestions. So, for example, if you go and this one is off, right? It means that this is going to be the macro 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If you turn it on, it's going to be the 9, 10, so on and so on and so on. Now, the only difference is, of course, this macros will belong to the performance if this is on or if it's off. That's why right here, when it says mod knobs, this belongs to when this button is off. But if you go to the next one, this controls belong to this button when it's on. All right, so let me just kind of prove it to you, and at the same time, we are going to be using them. So I'm going to go to off. So we're on the mod knobs, not the performance knobs. So we want to add the modulation, right? So I'm going to go right there, and I'm going to be moving the target just to add the modulation. So I want to maybe do a cutoff, right? So it's going to be modulating the filter cutoff. So what can we do? Well, instead of using the mod wheel, we can use the macros, the knobs. In this case, since this is off, it's mod knobs and not performance mod knobs. But again, at the end of the day, it's the same thing. So I'm going to be moving this, and it's going to say, oh, okay, so you're going to use the master knob. Notice that the names are just, like they're just illustrative. So once you do this, of course, I do enter, and now my master knob is going to be modulating my cutoff. So if I go right there, and go like that, I'm going to be modulating this with the master knob. Now, of course, what is going on? This is moving, but nothing is happening. So if you go to the mod again, we are not doing an intensity. So this works the same way we've been using. So I'm going to go right there and do some amount. I'm going to go there. So I'm going to be doing something. Notice that I'm playing something and nothing is happening. So I'm going to be moving this. And we are running that modulation. Right, so I'm gonna put the cutoff right there, kind of a 50%. And we have nothing if I go all the way down, but if I go to 50% and I go up, we are getting it. Right, so that's just one part of the deal. We need to discuss this a little bit more. Now, what I want to do, I want to maybe add a resonance to the same macro, but I want to be on performance knob. So I want to add a new one. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna modulate the resonance, right? And I'm gonna be turning this on. So now, instead of modulating with the mod knob 1 or the master mod knob, is going to be the performance master knob. And there's a difference. It's going to be, is this on or off? And that's pretty much it. But at the end of the day, we do the same thing. I'm going to be doing some amount and go resonance down. And I'm going to be modulating this. And notice that we get that resonance peak. And if I turn this off, we are going to be modulating the cutoff. Let me just go to the mod, and I'm going to delete this one. Right? I'm going to go enter. And I'm going to use this one, which is the one that we are using on the cutoff. Now notice that when we are on 50%, we are getting whatever we have right here. So if I go up, of course, we are moving it up. But from 50% below, it's just super dark. We are cutting a lot. Now, all these knobs, the performance and the mod knobs, can be bipolar or can be unipolar. Now, what's the difference? So, okay, I'm going to be showing you right now the application or part of the application. So right now, notice that this mod knob is right there. So if I move it up, it's going to go up and move the cutoff filter, right? Makes sense. But if I go all the way down, it's going to the other side. So this is a bipolar knob. It's going to positives, which is up, and then it's going to negatives, right? It's a bipolar. Now, when you go to the mod knobs, of course, you can select right here where you want to go or select your value. Same thing we are doing right there. But you can go right here and make this one unipolar. So now, instead of going to minus and plus to be bipolar, you're just making it unipolar. So I'm going to do the same thing, but now notice if I go to the mod knob all the way down, it's not going to negatives. It's going only to positives, and so on and so on and so on. So maybe you're thinking, okay, so what else can we do with the performance knob? That's it. I know it's a big part of the synthesizer, but this is what we can do. We use modulations, we tie something to that modulation, to this macro, and then we use them. But they're really important because we can create patches and then tie the modulations to the macros and really tweak and change the sound while we are performing. So these ones are important. And they're going to be even more important when we get to the to wave sequencing, because we can use them to maybe change the timing or change something on the pitch and, just kind of turn the macros. They're just macros. Okay, so now we need to talk about the vector that we have right here, which is going to be that one. Now, of course, if we go to the vector, it looks, the first page at least, it looks crazy, right? Just crazy. And the other one, it looks like super challenging, but it's really not. Now, the last page is going to be like kind of the globals, like the configuration where we're going to be enabling and changing a lot of features right here. Now, first, in order to use the vector, what we want to do is we want to change the volume or switch to different layers. But to do that, we're gonna need something kind of useful right here. So if I go to my layer A, that's, let me go up in volume. So this is what we have on my layer A. Now, if I go to layer B, we have this one, and this one is just not gonna work. So I'm gonna be selecting something different. Right, so I'm gonna go to Woodwind and I'm going to select the Choral Multi Flutes for that one. And it's because we have a sustained sound. This is what I want. So I'm going to be selecting that one, and I'm going to go to the C, and on this one we have a bar of grain. This one is going to work. I'm just going to leave it, is what we had on that one. And I'm going to go to the C, to the D, and this one is just maybe not going to work that well. I'm going to go to the choir and A. It's a little bit too loud, but that's fine. So I'm going to be selecting that one. This is what we have on the D. This is what we have on the C. This is what we have on the B, and this is what we have on the A, right? So now we have 4 different layers. So I'm going to be enabling kind of all of them, and there we go. Now all of them are just going to be playing at the same time. Now it's a little bit loud, so I'm going to go down in volume. Right, so pretty easy. Now what we want to do is to use the vector to toggle between A, B, C, and D. We're going to be kind of in a motion. And you have 2 ways of using this. You can do a manual kind of a movement between the layers, or you can automate this with just kind of kind of an envelope, or let's say movement. Now first we're going to do it manually, and then we're going to just check how we can do it with automating it. So when you go to vector, remember that you have all these pages. So all of this is just to automate pretty much what you're doing. Now in this case, I'm going to go to the final one, to the last page. Now the last page is going to give you some options that we're going to be using in a minute. But right here, we care about the last 2, the vector volume and the volume curve. So how can we enable the vector? Because if I play something right now, nothing is happening. Let me just do it with this hand. We're just not playing all the layers at the same time. So what you can do is just turn it on from here, or maybe you can do shift and do vector, and it's going to turn it on for you. So now when you're at the center, it means that you're playing all the different layers. If I play something, we have all. But if I go to A, we're just going to be listening to the A. If you go to the D, is the D. If you go to the C, it's going to be just the C. And then if you go to the B, it's just going to be the B. Now, the idea of the vector is that you can be maybe playing some layer and slowly introduce some other parts of the layer just by, doing something like this, and create some kind of a transition between the layers. That's kind of the whole point. Right. Now, notice that the transitioning is a bit too harsh at times. So after the update of the 2.0 of the firmware, you get the volume curve. So right now it's loud, and it is loud. So, but you have the other one, which is going to be smooth, and it's much quiet. And notice that it's just a lot different. It's just smoother. It's not that loud. Now, when you're in center, you're gonna hear that you lose a little bit of volume when you're at the center. But when you're going through A, B, or A and AC, or the different layers, just going to be a little bit more smooth. Okay, so this is one way of using the vector. And I'm not going to go crazy on the vector because it just could be very time consuming and this guide is just too long already. Now, what you can do with the vector, you can go to the first page and maybe automate what this is going to do. Maybe you're going to be playing a key, and when you play a key, this is just going to go and do something like that for you. Now, notice that if I move this, it's just kind of a moving right here where you want to go. So when you go maybe here, notice that it says 0 and 1 and 2 and 3 and R. So of course, since we want to modulate or kind of create a transition, the 0 is going to be, okay, so when we start, we're going to go from where to where. So it's going to be from 0 to 1, then from 1 to 2, then from 2 to 3, and then the R, you might be thinking, is the what? It's going to be the release. So when we release the key, where is going to go? Now, for example, let's say the 0 is this one. So then it's going to go to this one, then it's going to go to this one, and then it's going to go to this one, and we release the keys, it's going to go back to the center. This is what we want to do. Now, the thing is that we need to kind of create this automation, and we can do it manually right now, but do you have a function at the end on this one, which is going to be the joystick edit on. If I turn this off, and right now we go right back, if I move the joystick, notice that it's just not doing it. And this means that we need to do it manually, which is crazy. So no, we're not going to do that. I'm going to turn it on, and this is just kind of a moving for us. And notice that, it's just moving. So, okay, so let's say I want to go from A to D, from D to C, from C to B, and then from B back to the center. That's what I want to do. So, of course, you need to go right here. You need to position on the 0, and you're going to say, okay, so I'm going to go from the A, and then we go to the next one. This one is going to go to the B, and notice it's creating the transitioning for us. So I'm going to go to the B and make sure I'm right there. Now I'm going to go to the next one. This one is going to go to the C, and the next one is going to go to the B, and let's try to make it right there. And the next one is going to be the release, and the release is already on the center. So this is what I want to do. I want to go here, 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 and then when I release the key, this should be going back to the center. Now, if I play this, this is already going to do that transitioning for us. When you create this, it's going to do it for you. I'm going to be playing a key. And notice that we can hear that transitioning. And right now it's just staying on the B. Why? And it's because we said end on the B. But when I release the keys, it dies. Why is it dying? And it's because we have no release on everything that we are doing. We don't have a release right here. So I'm going to go to the layer, and I'm going to go to the amp of this one, and I'm going to be adding some release on this one, some release on this one, some release on this one, and I'm just going to go crazy because just to make it more obvious. That's it. So maybe I want to, just to make it more obvious, maybe we can do the last transitioning back to the, to the 1. Now, when you're using this, sometimes it's a good idea to position right there on the last place before the release. I'm going to go and just make it like that. And I'm going to go right there to the final, to the, joystick edit. And I'm just going to turn this off, and I'm going to go back. So this one, of course, I'm going to be positioning this one right here. So if I play something, notice that now it's kind of working a little bit better, and it's because this one is, when we move it, it's not in the way. When I release it, it's just going to go back to the A. Now, you cannot argue that the transition is a little bit too fast. That's fine. That's going to be, the next controls. So this one, the first one is going to be about the volume, which is kind of something that we already did. And the next one is going to be a more detailed, kind of a positioning of the different vectors. So maybe we can go to the release and just change the X and the Y. Notice that we can do it manually and be a bit more precise. But the next one is going to be about envelope times. And this, again, is an envelope. There's an envelope, and this is the envelope. It's telling how the vector, how to move. So, of course, it does it in times. When we go from 0 to 1, how much time is going to take? Same when we go from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, and then the 3 LP. Now, if you're asking what is LP, LP is a loop, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. And then we have the RLS, which is the release. So if we wanted to make this a little bit more obvious, why not making it 1 second and something and just make a long transition so we can really hear this. Now I'm going to leave the 3 to loop kind of all the way to 0. We are not going to use it right now. And I'm going to use the release maybe 1 second as well. So now it's going to be a bit more obvious because everything is just going to take more time to transition. And when I release, that sounds like a toilet. All right, that's fine. So if I release the keys, it's just going to go back to center. So yeah, you can just alter your times. Now, you can do more. And I believe this, I'm going to be, calling it day with the vector. You have a few more options. Now, you have the mode of time and you have the speed. But before that, you have the, we need to talk about the loop. So the loop right now, it says what's going to happen when we want to loop. It's going to loop from 0 to 3, or you can select some other things. For example, I can say, okay, so when we want to loop, we are going to go from 1 to 3 back and forward, or maybe from 2 to 3 all over again, and so on and so on. So in this case, I'm just going to leave from 0 to 3, which is going to be the whole thing. And right here, you need to select how many times you want to repeat. So what this will do, I'm going to do just, I don't know, maybe 3 or maybe 2, because, we have long times. So this is going to repeat the motion 3 times. And if I go right there to the envelope time, we have the loop. So we need to do something right there. I'm going to go right here and select some amount of time that it's going to take to enter to that loop. So it's going to do 1 round, and when it's done, it's going to do another round and another round because we are looping 2 times or twice. So, and it starts over. That's the first. That's the last one. And it just stays right there. And when I release, we go back to center. The next thing is going to be the time. So right now we are using seconds for the envelope right there. But maybe what you want to do is you want to use something else. So you can use tempo. So when you use tempo, you're going to be using subdivisions. It's just a little bit more kind of a tempo friendly. So now it's going to be faster because we have that. And it's just looping twice. But you get it, right? Now, this, of course, is going to scale the time, like we already discussed earlier. This is going to make it twice as long. So I'm going to just do that and show you that now it's going to be a little bit slower. Right. And then re-release and it ends. So that's the vector pretty much. Of course, if you don't want to use the vector, shift and do that. And that's it. It's off or it's on. Right. Now, the vector is cool. It's something that you need to kind of use and experiment a little bit with the vector. Okay, so let's talk about zones. I'm going to go out of the patch that we have, and I'm going to go back to the patch that we created to pretty much you used on this whole guide, first part of the guide. So if we go to layer A, we know that we have a synth. And I want to be changing some things. Now, what we need to talk about is the zones. So if we go and do shift and then page up, you have your layer programs. We already talked about this, your velocity zones, and this is part of the zones. But right now I want to talk about the keyboard zones. Now, notice that you have a high and you have a low and you have an H fade and an L fade. So what you can do, you can target it. I'm going to be showing you the keyboard on the screen because I want to really, all the action is going to happen right here. So if I kind of push the camera back, you're not going to be able to see this clearly. So I much prefer the camera to be focusing right there. So, okay, so the zones, it's what you can do. You can divide your keyboard in different zones, and your layers A, B, C, and D will only react to the zones you create right here. Pretty simple. Now, I'm going to need to kind of bring some sounds. The layer A, we have that B. Let's go to the B. We have that, that's fine. That's something we can use. On the C, we have that one. That's fine. And then on the D, we have that one. That's fine. Okay, so what we need to do, and notice that when I go right there, it's just kind of positioning us right there where we want to be. Okay, So how does this work? So right now you have a high and you have a low, and you're going to divide your keyboard in different parts. So if I go to my lower C, this is going to be my lower C. So maybe on the layer D, I want to play this just on one key. I don't want to play different keys and just, have the key, that sound play every single time. So I just can target this key. So I'm going to go right here is the high and the low. So of course, my low is going to be this one. So I'm going to go right there. Right, so that's my low. So I'm going to be going down. All right, so now I have my C3. If I play the C3, it's just going to work. Now, of course, if I go high, it's going to be playing it. Now, if I go to an octave down, it's not playing it. So that's, the whole purpose. Now, I'm going to go back to my C. Now, I need to kind of restrict what's going to happen on the highs. So I'm going to be going, and I'm just going to say C3. So we have C3 and C3. So this means that if I play C3, it's going to give us the layer D, but nothing else. And it's just going to be working on the C3. If I play different keys, it's not triggering. Right, so these are the zones, and we could, maybe make that kick on the C3 and maybe go to the high ones on the A and just, make it play on an octave, maybe something like this. Right, so we can go right here and find it. Now, you cannot argue that scrolling through all of this sometimes is a little bit crazy. Now, if you do enter, you hold it, and you type or you press whatever key where you want to be the low or the high, it's just going to position right there. So I'm going to be playing this on maybe after the D. So I'm going to go position right there. I'm going to do enter, and this is going to be kind of my octave. So now that sound, the A, it's only going to work on that position. So if I go to that zone, on this one we get the kick, but if I play something right there at the top, it's just only triggering the layer A. Now, at the same time, if we enable the other layers will trigger as well. But the D is not, because that one is restricted to the C. Now the strings are playing. But now, if I play above that C, I believe is a B3 that we have right here on the A, we don't get the layer A, we just get the B and the C. And by doing the same thing, you can, keep restricting or just creating zones for your different layers. Let's say that we want to go to, the B, and I'm going to be doing enter. This is going to start, the low is going to be my high, just something like that, the C4, and my high is going to be, is going to be one octave up. So now we have that one, and for now, I'm going to be turning off this one, the C. So I'm going to be getting the kick. Then we get the string, and it's restricted to this section. And then here, we get the bell. And if I play hop, notice that we are not getting the bell. It's just restricted to this position. So this is how the zones work. Now, I'm going to be going maybe to the strings one. I'm going to go and just solo that one. So we know that we can only play the string right there, and as soon as we get to the threshold, it's just not going to play. I'm playing the C3, and it's just not working. So you have right here something that says H fade and low fade. So if you go up on this one, notice that this is just going to change just a little bit. So what this means, and I'm going to make it really aggressive, if I play the first key, we can't play because we are just zoning this. And if I go up, we get it. But as soon as we get closer to the threshold, it's just going to get quiet. Just going to get super quiet because we are just fading the sound as we get closer to the high threshold. And the same thing is going to happen to the low. If I go to the low and I do something like that, the high, nothing is going to happen. And as I get close to the low threshold, it's going to get, just going to fade. So for now, I'm just going to go to the C, because if I go to this one, we have no restriction right there. So the C is going to be that one. So if I maybe go right there, what we can do, we can just, again, go and set the high for the C. And maybe I'm just going to So this is what we are doing. We are creating a threshold. We are not creating zones, but we are creating a threshold for the high and the low velocity. Now, if I play soft, it's going to trigger, and the limit is 81. So if I play a key and I play super hard, it's going to be 127. That's going to be the velocity. So the C layer is not going to trigger because I'm playing super hard, because the threshold, the maximum, is going to be 81. So if I do it within, if I play a key within the parameters of the velocity, the high velocity and the low one, it's just going to work. But if I do super low, it's just not going to work. And, that's how it works. So if I maybe go right there and go on the right here and go all the way to 1, it's only going to trigger when I play kind of a super soft. And if I play hard, it's just not going to play. And this is something that you could use with the sounds. Maybe you want to do something on your keyboard, on your performance, and maybe only the layer C will just trigger if you play super soft. If you play super hard, it's just not going to be playing. So if you made it this far, congratulations. This was a lot of information. We did a million things. Now notice that there's a smudge right here is the light that I have right here because I changed the camera, but that's fine. So you can do a million things even without using wave sequence. Now you know how to bring sounds to layers, create, use the filters and envelopes and effects modulations and create different sounds and play this and use the knobs as macros. You can go crazy at this point. You don't need wave sequencing. But, wave sequencing, it's kind of the main soul of this synthesizer. So on the next video, I'm going to be covering just wave sequencing. Now, if you're watching this today, because this video was released today, I don't want to block your learning. Maybe you already watched this guide and you're kind of super excited because you want to learn the wave sequence. I'm going to be releasing this tomorrow. Now, of course, if you're watching this in the future, all volumes were already released. So you can check on the cards or you can check on the description and you will find a link to the next video. So if this was useful for you, remember to like and subscribe, and remember that you can go to Patreon and maybe buy me a coffee and be a 1 month Patreon, or maybe go to the links on the description. You have a link for PayPal, or maybe you can do YouTube thanks. That's a thing right now. So right, so see you on the next one on the wave sequencing.